A Monday edition of the Sports Bash starts, well, right now. I'm your host, Mike Gill. Josh Henning producing today's show. You out there with some news around the Eagles as their offseason is officially here. The first decision of the offseason has been made. The Eagles have released Darius Slay, and now the building of the 2025 roster is underway. 1 week from today, we have NFL free agency. We'll see what the Eagles have to do as Darius Slay has been released. We'll give you the details on why and what it means coming up on a Sports Bash Monday. What's up, everybody? Hope you had a great weekend. Busy weekend, lot to dive into. Late Friday, we got the Joel Embiid news. You'll hear more on that coming up. Today, I've got 3 reasons I'm excited about the Phillies this season. If you have a reason you're excited about the Phillies this season, let me know. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. I have 3 reasons I came up with. You know, I was watching the Phillies game yesterday. They had 2 games yesterday. One was on TV against Baltimore. The other one was in Dunedin against the Blue Jays. I was kind of following along with both of them. After the game was over, they won one of the games 4-3. They lost one of the games 4-3. So it was kind of a microcosm of the Phillies weekend. Win one, lose one, yada, yada. And it's kind of a microcosm of what the season feels like, right? Not a lot of buzz, not a lot of excitement. I'll believe it when I see it. So I said, okay, let me step back and try to find a reason that I could get into this Phillies season, right? Give me something that I can kind of be like, all right, I'm excited about this. I came up with 3 reasons, and I'll talk about them throughout the day, but I want to see what yours are and see if any of your reasons match my reason. I even wore, if you're watching the video, I even wore my Phillies gear today. I'm all Phillied up there, Josh. I'm trying to get excited about a Phillies season now. I got 3 reasons I'm excited about the Phillies. I'm wearing a Phillies pullover today. Let's go. You got a Phillies. I didn't even notice until right now.
I am wearing a Phillies thing.
You're going old school, maroon.
Well, it's one of my few Philly shirts I got, and it was clean, and I felt like going Phillies today.
There you go. So we both got Philly stuff on. So I got 3 reasons why I'm excited about the Phillies this offseason. I'm going to share those a little bit later. Scott Lauber from the Philadelphia Inquirer is going to join us 3:30. He's been down there. You know those guys, they literally are there for like a month and a half. It's not like the worst thing in the world. Hey, I'm stuck in Florida. But it is a very interesting lifestyle that your job sends you there for a month and a half.
You could argue that being a baseball beat writer might be one of the best sports jobs on planet Earth.
It's a long job, man. It's long. It's every night. It's long. It's a long season. It's every night, man. You're grinding it.
Yeah, but then from basically November to January, you get at least the time to hit the reset button.
Yeah, it's still off season. They got a lot of. I mean, it's a grind. Being a beat writer for any sport is a grind.
True.
You got to go every night to the ballpark.
Well, if you had to choose one of the 4 sports, which one would you choose?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't want that job. I don't want to be a beat writer. That's something I never yearned to be. I don't want. I mean, the baseball, you're at the stadium every night, and it's a long night, especially before the pitch clock.
True.
I mean, that's a long night. Basketball is not as often, but there's a lot of I don't want to travel like that. I just don't like getting on and off planes.
I would love to do that. I would love to just have the opportunity to just travel around and go see and experience stuff. And
you do. You say that until you do it all the time. I mean, the traveling gets old after a while. I was the play-by-play guy for 2 years for a team. I wanted to absolutely get off that beat. I did not want to do it anymore. I wanted to be a play-by-play guy was what I really wanted to do. I kind of got, I ass backwards myself into doing sports talk radio. I really wanted to do play-by-play, but I realized after doing play-by-play for 2 years, I did not like to travel. I just didn't like going through the airports and flying. I mean, they're quick flights for the most part when you have, I'm doing West Virginia basketball, so everything was like in the Northeast. They were in the Big East at the time, but whatever. I just didn't like to travel. But anyway, Lauber's going to join us at 3:30. Kaplan's in today. So let's get into this Darius Slay. Darius Slay gets released today. Why? Well, it saves the Eagles $4.3 million against the cap. Is that the only reason he gets released, though? That is the question. So do they want to bring him back? According to some reports, the Eagles are interested in bringing him back. They will save 4.3 because it's a post-June 1st release. You guys don't need to know all that. But it's not about the savings this year. They will save about $16 million by making this move for next year as well. So what does that mean moving forward? It means that now the Philadelphia Eagles either A, try to get Darius Slay to come back on a cheaper deal, which he has said, and here's what Darius Slay said on the Amon-Ra St. Brown Brothers podcast. Did I get that right?
You can just say St. Brown Brothers podcast.
Well, I wanted to let people know who it was.
Who specifically was
It's
asking
the
the question?
St. Brown Brothers, but it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, the receiver, and I guess his brother, who I don't know.
He has two brothers, actually, and they all are on the podcast together.
Okay.
It's actually very confusing.
Well, the brother that I saw, I only saw one. So there was 3 people in the video. One was Slay, so I only figured there was Amon-Ra St. Brown and then his brother. You're telling me there's another brother. I don't care. It's insignificant to this story.
That's why I'm not
Josh
naming
always
the names.
has to complicate things. I don't give a flying flip who is the host of this show. I'm just letting people know that Amon-Ra St. Brown is the only guy that matters in this video. Slay is in the podcast. This was a couple of weeks ago. He was asked about his contract. He says he has 1 year left, but he definitely wants to play one more. Here is Slay.
I got one more left, but you know what I'm saying? You know how that works. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, so whatever they want to do, I might re-sign back, hopefully. And, if I ain't, then we'll see what we're doing, because I do want to play one more year for sure, though.
Okay, so Slay obviously there says, I want to play one more year. So he's got 1 more year left. He also made it pretty clear he really only wants to play in either Philadelphia or one other spot. Here's where Darius Slay said he would be interested in playing.
Sound like you don't mind coming back.
I knew he was going to try to recruit you. I knew
I
it.
mean, this is what it sounded like. And then love the city. Like, he did so much for it. Like, you already won the Super Bowl. Just come back.
Oh, man, I love but you know what I'm saying? If it is, it is. If it ain't, it ain't. But for sure, the 2 spots I would love to always be at is either Philly or the main 2. The main ones I would be at, though.
All right, remember, he was drafted by Detroit in 2013, Mississippi State. He was a second-round pick, I believe. 3 Pro Bowls, 1-time All-Pro in Detroit, 3 Pro Bowls in Philadelphia, and a Super Bowl championship. So he essentially says, I want to play one more year. He still loves Detroit. He called it his second home, and he admits it's either Philly or Detroit. Now, the question is, what if Philly makes him an offer that he doesn't really feel comfortable with, too low? What if Detroit isn't interested in bringing him back? Does Darius Slay sit out? Or does he take the low ball offer from Philadelphia here? He's 34 years old. He had a good season last year. I wouldn't say he was wow, but he had a good season last year. But he will be going into he's 34, probably going to be 35 at some point. I got to find out when his birthday, but what's the difference? He will be 34 next season. There you go. He will be 34 next season. Not an age where corners are generally excelling, but if the Eagles, and Joe Fortenbaugh talked about this on Joe and Q, he says the Eagles are always calculated in how they make these moves. They are calculated, and they are not overly loyal to their guys. Here's Joe Fortenbaugh.
There can't be an insane amount of loyalty. We can't have legacy contracts if you want to be able to compete at a high level year after year after year. If you want to win, you got to be cold-hearted, right? You got to make tough decisions. And in this spot, this is a really tough decision from an emotional standpoint because he was a great Eagle. Everything about him is something that will be loved. And if he ever comes back to Philadelphia, he will be applauded. But if the Eagles are going to look towards defending the chip next year, they've got to make decisions like this so they can round out the rest of the roster.
This is the kind of decision they have to make. But they can make the decision because they have options, right? So what are the options? Slay is now not here any longer. He has been released. He's a free agent. The problem with Slay on the free agent market for him is he really only has said, I want to play for 2 teams. Now, if he doesn't get an offer from Detroit and Philadelphia lowballs him and somebody else calls him, I would imagine he's open to at least listening. I don't know. Maybe Arizona calls and John Gannon says, how would you like to pair back up here? We have a good young defense. We're building something here. Maybe. I don't know what Slay's, yearn is to play elsewhere. But Philadelphia makes the move because they can. Fortenbaugh said it here. The Eagles, they have Slay, a good locker room guy. But they have to feel pretty confident that they can let Slay walk from a Super Bowl team and that they have the pieces in place to replace him if they are not able to bring him back.
The Eagles have to be confident that their leadership structure is of such that losing Slay will be something that they can withstand that moving forward. They save some money financially. I think from a personnel standpoint, Quinyon Mitchell is holding down one side. Cooper DeJean could step up and hold down the other side. You should be fine. But that's not to make light of everything Slay has brought to the table. He was a fantastic Eagle. It's going to be sad to see him go.
All of that is accurate. I mean, he was a very good Eagle. It will be sad to see a guy who won a Super Bowl move on, but I think the Eagles are making the right decision here. Why? Well, one, what do you do with Cooper DeJean? I am inclined to keep Cooper in the role that he's in. But I don't want to say egos get in the way because, quite frankly, Cooper DeJean doesn't seem like an ego guy. He's been at every single post-Super Bowl signing appearance that you can think of. I mean, this guy seems like the nicest kid in the world. Like one day he's in North Wildwood hanging out. The next day he's in Iowa watching a women's basketball game. The next day he's at some sporting goods store. And, it's like this guy seems like the nicest kid ever. Is he going to walk in and say, I want to play outside corner or else? I don't get the vibe that is Cooper DeJean's attitude. Now, do the Eagles want to move him to outside corner? Don't know. Did they draft him thinking this guy's an outside corner? Possibly. But did they see him at nickel and say, this is a guy that we feel like we have the very best player at this position and that we want to keep him here? So then the question would be, well, how do we replace the outsides? Look, one thing about Cooper DeJean, if you remember, McMullen told us I think he was on Friday's show, the Eagles scouted him and thought that he could be an outside corner, that they know that he has the IQ to do that. The other guys on this team, Kaylee Ringo, Eli Ricks, Isaiah Rodgers, they are not slot nickel corners. So do you like one of those guys if you're Philadelphia? And I would imagine Rodgers is the guy they would re-sign and bring him back. He's a younger player. Remember, they signed him from the Colts after he got suspended for gambling, and he had to miss a whole season. So now do you bring him in here and say, you are the guy, Isaiah Rodgers, and it's going to be you and Quinyon Mitchell, and it's going to be DeJean in the role that he was in? That's where I think the Eagles should go. I think the Eagles should look to bring Rodgers back with the other guys, Ringo and Ricks, battling out for the backup. Keep that depth. Keep those young corners as depth. But bring Rodgers back. And I stress, everybody, I would keep Cooper DeJean in the slot role. That's what I would keep. I would keep him there because, to me, he is a weapon that nobody else has. Agree or disagree out there? 609-403-0973. He, to me, DeJean, is a weapon that nobody else has. Generally, that's one of your weakest guys, right? Your third corner is a smaller guy. He's kind of quick and fast, but he's, the weakest of your corner room. For the Eagles, he makes the corner room what it is, I think. It's what he does that allows everybody else to be outstanding at their jobs because he is so good in his role in what he takes away that I think it's a weapon that Philadelphia can't afford to change.
Philadelphia has also shown you the 2 times they've won a championship is when they've had strong play from the nickel corner position. I think it's a proven fact that position, at least for the way Philadelphia builds their rosters, may be even more important than some other teams.
listen, it's almost like what we said before. The Eagles value the backup quarterback more than other teams. That's why they draft Jalen Hurts over a starting safety when they needed a starting safety, but they valued backup quarterback more. Do they value Cooper DeJean as a slot guy more than they do an outside corner because of what he does? And it means there's less pressure on the outside corner. I mean, Darius Slay, did he have a great year? Did he have a bad year? Who the heck knows? All I know is this. You didn't hear his name all that much. He wasn't getting burned all that much. And I thought Cooper DeJean, what he did, right, when you look at what Cooper DeJean was able to do, I thought, was so good when you take a look at he covered those flats. He was able to cover your tight end. He could cover your slot guy. He could cover the outside guy. And the area that he was able to cover on those over the middles, the flats to the outside, he made it like, and then your corners are good enough. I mean, Slay and Mitchell are really good that you're always constantly taking away those short intermediate routes, and you're letting the two corners now get matchups that are favorable.
Well, it's the idea that in Fangio's scheme, there's a lot of overlap, and you need a guy like DeJean and C.J. Gardner-Johnson to help bridge those overlaps. So when you have a guy like Mitchell and Slay, you're asking them, as you said, they can do less because you have somebody to pick up if a guy gets dropped off or lost in coverage. You have these other guys like DeJean, who's a phenomenal athlete. You saw the play on Jamar Chase. That was not his primary assignments on that play, but because he was the overlap, he got that fourth down stop.
Yeah, I mean, so now that Darius Slay is out the door, and look, he could come back. I think there was a report out there from John Clark from NBC Philadelphia who basically said, and I'll bring up the report for you if you're watching on the YouTube video. He says, I'm told it's possible that Darius Slay, after being released, could still come back to the Eagles at a lower number. Now, I think the Eagles obviously say that. They don't have, it doesn't mean they mean it. I think they don't want to be like, nope, no chance that he comes back, kick dirt on him on the way out the door. No, of course. If there's a way that they can make him come back, I think the Eagles would be interested in that.
Well, also, and if as someone who's listened to Darius Slay's podcast pretty much for the last 2 years, every single week, I can tell you that
you listen to Darius Slay's podcast?
I do.
I did not know that.
I think I got all those audio bites.
Well, I could find the audio bites. I can see them on social media. It doesn't mean I actually.
Social media.
It doesn't mean I actually listen to his podcast. No, I'm not saying that they're on social media, Josh. I mean, if you hear something on social media, then you start to comb through it. I didn't know you listened to the whole podcast.
Every week.
Good for you.
2 years.
Good for you. You ever learn anything on those podcasts?
I do. I learned about we talk about the Fangio thing, how Fangio trained them differently in practices compared to Cy and Patricia. That was one big thing I learned, and I don't want to waste our time with the list of things Josh has learned, so let's move on. But the point is that Slay has said on the podcast that for him, he loves Philadelphia, and that it wasn't not always about the money for him. It was about, how they treated him, the security of the job. And this past year, he loved working with Mitchell and DeJean. And he talked about how he had so much pride when DeJean got the interception for a touchdown in the Super Bowl.
Well, he's definitely a locker room guy that's going to be missed. But keep in mind, Philadelphia lost Kelsey. They lost Fletcher. They've lost others in the past, and they have been able to move on from it. And by having him here this year, hopefully those guys learned from Slay and that they now jump into the Slay role.
I just don't think Slay is the kind of guy who's going to look around the market and be like, if I don't get this number, I'm not going to play. Because he has also said that if he doesn't play this year, he's going to go watch his son play high school sports. Like, he's not one of these guys who's like, I'm a mercenary for one more year.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, if Detroit's not interested and Philadelphia doesn't make him an offer that he's interested in, does he just say, okay, I'm good?
I think he does.
But I don't know. If you play that bite from him again, I think he's pretty clear that he wants to play one more year.
I got one more left, but you know what I'm saying? You know how that works. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so whatever they want to do, I might re-sign back, hopefully. If I ain't, then we'll see what we're doing, because I do want to play one more year for sure, though.
I do want to play one more year for sure. So he could say, yeah, I want to play in Philly, Detroit, but Philly, Detroit has to want him to play there too. And if they don't, and he says, I want to play one more year for sure, he's got to find a dance partner.
He does, but I don't think that I don't see him going to like some mediocre middle of the road team. Like I would see him going to a contender. I don't see him being like, I just want to play somewhere, and then a team like the Titans calls, he's just kind of like, all right, I guess I will.
609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. Real quick, Darius Slay release. It's post June 1st, which means the team will save around $4.3 million against the cap. They have, when you look at it, they got a couple decisions now. Do you move Cooper DeJean to the outside? Or is it another guy, Kaylee Ringo? Do you bring back Isaiah Rodgers? He is a free agent, but if you bring Rodgers back, I would imagine that is the sign that he takes over for Slay and they keep DeJean in the middle. So with free agency starting a week from today, there's your first story.
I will give you a dark horse for Slay. If he does not get a contract with the Eagles or the Lions, there is one team that I'm going to give you right now, Mike. He lives in Houston year-round and trains there.
So you say the Texans.
I'm just saying, he lives there year-round. He's got a training facility down there. It might be a, hey, I'm already here kind of deal. You know what I mean?
All right, there you go. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video streaming on the X platform and on YouTube at Mike Gill Show. Subscribe, be a part of the show. Multiple ways you can get us. You can get us through the free mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City, through the Message Us button. You can get us on the text board, 609-403-0973. You can get us on the X platform, at Mike Gill Show. On YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. In the comments section. Easy to do. Get on board. We are just getting started. Darius Slay is the first move of the Eagles all season as they go for back-to-backs. And we've got you covered right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Coming up, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, the weekend review. Will we ever see Joel Embiid in a Sixers uniform again? Should the Eagles bring Darius Slay back? I got 3 reasons I'm excited about the Phillies. Does Mike have any? That's next. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. All right, 229, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofac.com, set to join me. Look back at the weekend, all the big stories, including the Friday news dump. Joel Embiid shut down for the rest of the season, but does that mean he is shut down maybe longer? How long will we ever see Joel Embiid back in Philadelphia? We got that. Plus, Darius Slay has been released by the Philadelphia Eagles. It's the first move for Howie Roseman this offseason. Free agency for the NFL begins a week from today. And three things I'm excited about the Phillies this season. Here's Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofatlanticcity.com, right now on the Sports Bash. I guess we'll start with the Friday news dump, Mike. Joel Embiid out for the season. Interesting messaging. They consulted with top specialists. They determined he's medically unable to play. He'll miss the rest of the season. And then there were reports that he and the front office did not see eye to eye on all this. And, yeah, the confounding, confusing season of Joel Embiid just continued through the weekend.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts there. First of all, I don't think anybody is surprised that he shut down. Anybody who saw him play recently is surprised that they decided to shut him down. What concerns me and what, quite frankly, I find alarming as far as his future, there is no answer right now, right? It's not like, go have this surgery, rehab, we'll see you on October 1st of next year. You'll be as good as new. The other part of the statement was we're going to develop a treatment plan going forward. And I guess the original treatment plan was just kind of get out there, play, and the knee would adjust. And over time, you'd get less swelling and less pain, and you'd be okay. Obviously, that didn't work. So I just fear that we're headed down, a Bill Walton road here or a Yao Ming road or a Greg Oden road where, a big guy's body just gives out on him and ends what, is or was a brilliant career.
Shams Charania from ESPN reported that Embiid went directly to Josh Harris about his knee. He says he and the Sixers doctors have really disagreed on what to do throughout this. Does it go back to how did the Sixers sign off on signing Joel Embiid?
Well, the fact that they gave him the extension, I don't know what choice they had at that point. They obviously could have held off on it. Maybe their doctors told them that Embiid's knee was going to progress. I'm not surprised he went to the owner. I mean, you're talking about a guy. I mean, that's an almost $200 million investment. If I owned a team or a company and my $200 million employee can no longer perform, I'd like for him to come tell me that himself also. So, my concern is, again, will we ever see Embiid at his peak again on a consistent basis? And if we don't, what does that mean for the Philadelphia 76ers going forward? Where do they go if Joel Embiid can't play at the level he played at the last few years?
I'll ask you, Mike, do you think we see Joel play next season at all?
My guess off the top of my head is you wouldn't see him before Christmas. I think if he comes back, you'd see him in January of that season. To me, that would be best case scenario right now. I don't think you would see him before Christmas. And I'd love to be wrong about that. Again, this is no reporting. This is just a gut feeling.
Right. Nobody knows. Nobody knows the answer to that.
I don't even think Embiid knows, or the Sixers know. But look, even if he's feeling, let's just say, Mike, he goes through the summer and he feels great, and he feels like he can play October 1st or October 31st when the NBA season begins. Even if he feels great like that, if I'm the Sixers, I'm telling him, okay, let's pump the brakes even more. Let's give you another 3 months to get ready, and we'll suit you up in the new year and see what you have then going forward.
They won on Saturday night, by the way. I don't know how that was even possible. You're trying to lose games. Now they win. Sixers, of course, tonight, they're taking on Portland. You can listen to the game on 97.3 ESPN. They'll play tomorrow night as well against Minnesota. Boston on Thursday. They got a busy little stretch coming up here, but Joel Embiid will not be with them the rest of the way. All right, Mike, let's go to the Darius Slay stuff. I don't know if it's a big surprise, but They do release him. It's the first move they've made this offseason. Now, they had said that they're open to bringing him back, but is this a sign that, hey, this is the NFL world, you got to move on? But he's 34 years old. Do you think Slay will be back with the Eagles? If you're the Eagles, do you even look to bring him back, or do you have to make those tough choices and move on?
I think you've got to make the tough choices and move on, right? And we talked about this last week about how you keep a successful NFL franchise going is you've got to walk away from players that have been great for you and have been part of winning teams. And there's no doubt that Darius Slay has done that. I mean, he's led the Eagles to 1 Super Bowl, 2 Super Bowl appearances, 1 Super Bowl win. And I just think Howie Roseman told us the roster was going to look different next year. And, this is step one. You've got to part ways with guys you have emotional attachments to keep the thing rolling. And this is step one of that process. And are they saving some cap money to go get Myles Garrett? Are they saving some cap money to bring back some of their own free agents? We'll see how that progresses. But to me, this is what you've got to do. If you're going to be successful in the NFL, you've got to say goodbye to players that you have emotional attachments to and have been a big part of your past success.
All right, I'm going to get your opinion on this. Do you keep Cooper DeJean in the role he played last year, or do you put him on the outside to replace Slay?
No, I think you put him on the outside to replace Slay. I think he's shown he has the ability to play that position. I think it's natural, right? He did the one thing this year. Now you want him to move into a bigger role. This is the way it works. And plus, you've got him on the rookie contract, and that's what the Eagles want to do right now. They want to have as many good players on rookie contracts as they can to manage the cap going forward. So, yeah, I agree 100% with that move. Yeah, Cooper DeJean has got to do more next year. That's part of the evolution.
All right, Mike McGarry for the Press of Atlantic City. By the way, Mike, I disagree with you there. I'm keeping him in the same spot. He was excellent in that role. I know outside guys are, there's this whole thing, like outside guys are thought to be more valuable. There was a time where, like, the left tackle was the most important guy. Is that still the case? I don't know. Is left tackle still, like, the highest premium?
Yeah, I think left tackle is still a big position. You got the quarterback's blind side there. But, Mike, the other thing you got to think of, maybe Cooper DeJean and his agent want to go to the outside because the outside is where the money is.
Well, right. I agree with you there. That's what I was saying. DeJean doesn't seem to me like the kind of guy that would be like, hey, guys, I want to go play. But maybe his agent may say that because he seems to me, I said earlier, Mike, one day he's in North Wildwood signing autographs. The next day he's in Iowa waving hands at the women's basketball game. The next day, he has been at every – it seems that when the Eagles are like, hey, we need someone to make an appearance, it's Cooper DeJean every time. So I don't know that he's the kind of guy that demands, I want to play outside corner. But the money is – you're right about that.
Mike, everybody loves money. Okay? Me, Cooper DeJean, we all love money, and we all want to maximize our earning potential. So he's a nice guy, and that doesn't make him a bad guy because he wants to make the most he can. So there you go.
I got you there. I feel you that one. All right. Mike, we did see Taiwan Walker yesterday. Now, Rob Thompson said he is a candidate for the 5th starter spot. I can't see that actually happening. But I watched the game yesterday, and I came up with 3 reasons to be excited for the Phillies. Do you have something in your mind about why Phillies fans, because it seems like, hey, you ran this team back. I'll believe it when I see it. Is there something, do you have a sales pitch for Phillies fans to say, hey, get excited for this season, and this is why?
Well, just the general, 95 wins last year with this core. I know the people are like, we can't run it back, this or that. We didn't do enough to improve. But I think just the fact that you have a 95-win team coming back with this core is reason enough to be excited. I'd be interested. What are your 3 reasons to be excited?
All right, number 1 for me is I really like what I see from the starting pitching. Christopher Sanchez, I believe that he has now taken a step forward as opposed to being a question mark of who he is. Last year, wow, look at this season. Now, after watching Sanchez pitch, I guess it was yesterday against the Orioles, I believe that guy is legit. To me, he has taken a step towards the top of the rotation as opposed to mingling in the middle there. So that's one, coupled with what they got from Luzardo. I think those two guys really have sold me that this rotation is going to be – I'm talking like, what was it, 2011, where every time you went out, you had the best guy on the mound. You can win 110 games with this rotation here. Now, I don't know what winning 110 games means, right? Come playoff time, but that's something to be excited about. I have been a Bohm guy, and I know he hit 2 home runs yesterday. Don't get all carried away with the 2 home runs, but I think Bohm's going to have a big year. I think Bohm is going to have a big year. I'm talking 25 homers, 115 RBI, somewhere in that range. I think he's going to have a big season after all these trade rumors. He looked bigger. I loved him driving the ball the opposite way the other day. So that would be 2. And the third is I'm excited that they're going to change this lineup up. And that's a hopeful one, but I think them tweaking and changing this lineup will actually work out for them.
Yeah, I'll take all 3 real quick. Number 1, I agree with you. If they stay healthy, and Luzardo might be the biggest piece of that, if they stay healthy, I think the Phillies might just have the best starting rotation in all of baseball, and that goes a long way. And they not only have 5 good starters, but with Taijuan Walker throwing like he did yesterday, Joe Ross in the bullpen, they've actually got some depth there too. 2, I agree with you there. Either Alec Bohm or Bryson Stott, in my mind, has to take a big leap forward this year. Stott a bigger leap than Bohm. Bohm had 97 RBIs last year. But one of those 2 guys has got to really improve this year for the Phillies to sort of maximize their potential and go deep in October. They can't have the same years that they had last year, especially Stott. Bohm or Stott got to take a big step forward there. And, as far as what was the third one again? I forgot already.
The third one is the fact that they're finally going to maybe shake this lineup up a little bit with Turner leading off, maybe Schwarber, maybe Harper hitting 2. And because of that, I like Bohm's situation. But the fact that they are going to look at a different lineup configuration. Yeah,
to me, I agree with you there. But to me, again, the thing that I think a lot of fans are going to be focused on, and I said this last week, a guy who's going to be in the crosshairs is Trey Turner. I think it's going to be very interesting how he handles that leadoff spot. Does he run more? Is he more aggressive? Does he become the Trey Turner that Phillies fans thought they were getting when they signed him for $300 million 2 years ago? So I think if there's a player who's kind of in the crosshairs who we're all going to be paying attention to in March and April, it's going to be Trey Turner and him being in that leadoff spot. I think that's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. If it plays out well, the Phillies might be able to take another jump forward.
Yep, I agree. I think Turner will be a much better leadoff guy here than he was in the spot that he was before. And they need it. They need a better Trey Turner, no doubt. But I like your other point about Stott, too. If they can get more from Bohm and Stott, and then Turner gives them more at the leadoff spot, is that enough to crack this lineup code that has been a problem for them? Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. Mike, I know it's a crazy time of the year for the high school scene. Who's still going? What are you covering?
Yeah, state tournament resumes today. I'm on the road right now, headed over to Eastern Regional High School, Atlantic City versus Eastern in a South Jersey Group 4 quarterfinal game. We've got a lot of teams in action tonight. Middle Township boys and girls, Wildwood Catholic boys, St. Joe boys, Holy Spirit boys and girls. A lot of playoff action tonight, so check in pressofac.com. Follow me on Twitter. We'll have the results for you, game stories, everything else. We move into the second week here of the state high school basketball tournament.
Very good. Make sure you check out Mike at AC Press McGarry for the updates on the game on the Twitter X platform, and of course at pressofac.com. Thanks, Mike.
All right, Mike, we'll see you down the road. Thank you.
Yeah, there's Mike McGarry, everybody, from the Press of Atlantic City, pressofatlanticcity.com, here on the Sports Bash, as we are just kicking off a Monday edition. It's a busy Monday. Your text messages are coming in. I'm going to react to some of them. Drew and EHT, I see your text message. Matt in Delaware, I see your text message. Paul from Fairton, I don't know where that is, but I'll check it on your text message as well. Jeff in Ocean City, I see your text messages. We'll get to those and everybody else's throughout the show. If you want to get your text on the show, it's easy to do. 609-403 0973, 609 403 0973. Shoot us a text. I'll read and react to that. Or get on the free mobile app. Download the app in the Apple Store, Google Play. It's powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City, and we can read off your messages from the phone. You can watch on the X platform at Mike Gill Show. You can watch on the YouTube platform at Mike Gill Show. Smash that like button for me. Subscribe, baby. Let's go. It's a Monday edition of the Sports Bash. 10 to the top of the hour. We're hanging out on a Monday. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Paul from Fairton, which apparently is right outside Bridgeton and Millville.
Cumberland County.
Could be Salem. But most likely Cumberland, yes.
I thought it was Cumberland, but...
He said Slay getting cut before Bradbury is wild. Does Bradbury somehow survive and end up with a spot on this team because of his contract? I think Slay will be back on a team-friendly deal as well as Rodgers. I could see Slay back in a backup role this year, though. Thanks, Paul from Fairton. Bradbury, I think if you cut him, his cap hit is probably detrimental.
Cumberland County, by the way.
Cumberland County.
Learned and confirmed.
Good stuff. Would that be accurate? I don't know what I know Bradbury, they couldn't cut him this year because the cap hit was too much. But that's why Slay gets cut and Bradbury doesn't, because I'm sure there's some sort of cap implications.
Yeah, I'm pulling up Bradbury's contract now, but last year it would have been a massive hit if they cut him last year.
Drew from EHC says Cooper DeJean was actually rated highest as an outside shutdown corner at Iowa more than any other spot he lined up during his college career. He was utilized in a number of positions, but because of the notion that white corners haven't really existed at the highest level, many people just assumed that when he turned pro, he'd be shifting to safety position or, at best, a nickel. Well, real quick on that, Drew, the Eagles assumed differently. They viewed him as an outside corner. That, according to John McMullen, they viewed him as an outside guy, but if you looked at the Eagles roster this year, they didn't have an outside spot for him. I'm not suggesting that he doesn't have the speed and the size to play outside corner. My point is he was so good in that role, and it's so hard to find someone who makes a impact in that role. That's the thing. If you can find someone to make an impact at that position, sometimes you just have a guy, and he does a good job, but this guy made an impact there. So I'm not downplaying anything that you're saying, that he has the size and the speed to do it. His tackling ability alone is much more valuable in the inside than it is playing outside corner. So, yeah, I don't know what Cooper's future is with this team. Do they view him as an inside? Do they view him as an outside? Does Fangio want to move him? Does Fangio say, look, after 1 year of having him, I don't want to move that guy? I think that will be a big story in training camp. I think that when they get out on the field in training camp, the first thing will be, especially if Slay's not back, is what do they do with Cooper?
By the way, Bradbury would be zero savings if cut before June 1st. After June 1st, he would only be a very marginal savings, a lot of dead money there.
Yeah, that's why he doesn't get released. To that guy back there who's wondering, why not Bradbury? Why
Slay's was much easier to release and save money on.
609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. Let's quickly fit in Matt in Delaware. Mike, this whole thing, shutting Embiid down for the rest of the year, Sixers season being wasted year, doesn't hurt as much with how they started off and have been taking on water from the start. As dedicated Sixers and NBA fan, once they were 10 games under 500 year was lost. Anyway, so the news doesn't hit as hard as if they were the top. So you're taking it as, hey, who cares? I get it. Look, who cares if Embiid's shut down? You actually want him to be shut down at this point because your team is so far out of it. That's the moral of the story on that. The problem with the shutdown there is why now and what it means for the future. Why now if it could have been happening 3 months ago and just said, look, this is a lost season. Just get him out on the just get him into surgery or get him into what is next for him faster. That would be the question.
I think the big issue with Embiid is the fact that if this was all handled differently, I think a lot of people would feel differently about it. You know, if the messaging was much more consistent and more clean from the beginning, I think Sixer fans would be less disheartened about this whole season.
As always, a lost Sixer season and more craziness. After consulting with top specialists, what's next for Embiid? One former NBA player says that he could go the Kobe route. That's coming up in a little bit later on the Sports Bash Live. What are the options for the Eagles to replace Darius Slay, or is the best option just bringing him back? That's next, plus Scott Lauber on the Phillies coming up. What are some of the things that have emerged from spring training? What are some of the things that have already been answered from spring training? I have 3 things I'm excited about this Philly season. What are you excited about this Philly season? Let me know. 3 o'clock, Sports Bash this hour brought to you by Broadley's Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning, your trusted source for heating, plumbing, service, installation. 609-390-3907, online, broadleys.net. Mike Gill, Sports Bash, what's up? A lot of ways to get involved. We want to try to make you a bigger part of the show this Phillies season and moving forward to the Eagles and everything. And you can do that in a variety of ways. Text board always open, 609-403-0973. Free mobile app has a Message Us button feature on it. Download the app in the Apple Store, Google Play. Thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City. It's a free message. You hit Message Us. You can type your message out. It'll come right to the text board as well if you're listening on the mobile app. On the X platform, at Mike Gill Show. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and there's a open chat on the YouTube channel, which it's very easy to do. Probably the easiest way is right there on YouTube, on the phone, text message. Easy to get in touch with the Sports Bash Studios, and we want to make you a bigger part of the show. So let's rock and roll with some text messages, shall we, Josh? 609-403-0973. A lot of mix here. We'll kind of do like a little smorgasbord here. A little buffet, if you will. Phil says, hey, Mike, there are a number of pretty good linebackers that are free agents. Greenlaw, Bolton are among them. If those other linebackers don't re-sign prior to free agent, the competition could be a good sign for the Eagles to get Baum back at 28. How many teams are in the market for linebackers at $13 million plus? Okay, a lot there, but the linebacking, you're right. I did look at the linebacking. I saw Nick Bolton. I really like him. I don't know how many teams are going to be in the market for a $13 million linebacker, but what I do think is that, like, for instance, here's my thought. It kind of wraps into what Washington did this weekend. Washington went and signed traded for Deebo Samuel. What did they give up for Deebo? Basically nothing. A 5th-round pick is what they did. This was Washington. This is how I read what happened here with Washington. San Francisco essentially said, we need to sign Brock Purdy. So we got to get Deebo Samuel out of here, right? San Francisco was willing to basically take less for someone to take Deebo's contract so that they had more flexibility to sign their own guys. This is where Philadelphia wins because they can sign Deebo and Brock Purdy. In other words, they can sign Hurts and A.J. Brown. They can sign Hurts, A.J. Brown, and Devontae Smith. They can sign Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Saquon Barkley. San Francisco essentially has to unload Deebo because they have to figure out a way to get Purdy signed. Now, the financial burden that Purdy brings is bigger than Hurts. That's one of the problems because San Francisco, of all the quarterbacks that signed since Hurts, has now pushed Purdy to the front of the line, whereas now Hurts is at the back of the line, essentially. Right. That's where Philadelphia got it worked out for them when Hurts became a free agent, that they set the market for Hurts because if you remember, Burrow was up at the same time, so was another quarterback was right there at the same time.
Well, so the thing is that people got to remember that it's whoever is next gets the bigger contract. So when the Eagles got Hurts done before Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, when they got that deal done, the reason why it looks so good now is because the Eagles said, well, we get it done now. We're forcing everybody else to up their offer to their guys. Justin Herbert was another one who got a deal right after Hurts did. So everyone else got a bigger, fatter contract because Hurts was basically the other guy. And the Eagles win because they were first to strike.
It also was they were first to strike and the time. I mean, since then, other teams now have signed guys, which pushes the price up even further.
Right, that's what I was explaining, is that all these other guys I just named all are making larger contracts than Gill because they were next.
Right, but that's my point with Purdy, is because the 49ers got the benefit of having Purdy at the cheapest deal,
Right.
Now they're going to get whacked on the other side.
The other side is, if you just mentioned, Mike, about Roseman. Let's remind folks, part of the reason why Howie does what he does is because he does have a legitimate background as a front office guy, whereas a lot of these other guys around the league, they didn't take the traditional path up the ladder, learning the system. No offense to John Lynch, he seems like a nice guy, but he doesn't have the expertise of experience that Howie Roseman does.
So who needs a linebacker? Well, I would say the 49ers probably could use a linebacker if they don't
bring Greenlaw back.
If they let him walk. I would think Dallas is in the market for a linebacker. Does Dallas want to go to the Philadelphia, and say, hey, we want to bring Zach Bond here. We want to get him away. I think Miami will need a linebacker when you take a look at some of their needs. I think Indianapolis needs a linebacker. Do they want to spend the kind of money on a linebacker? Shane Steichen has some Philly roots. Does he value? I think Seattle needs a linebacker. I think Tampa needs a linebacker. I think Denver needs a linebacker. So probably a couple of more teams. There are just a few.
I would say half the league needs a linebacker.
The Rams need a linebacker. And by the way, the Rams get Stafford back, and they think they are a play away from beating Philadelphia. So I think the Rams are a team to keep an eye on. But a big team, in my opinion, to keep an eye on, and they need a linebacker, is Washington. I think Washington would be a team to keep an eye on. They went out and got Debo. I don't think they're done. And do we think that Washington, I want to ask the people out there, and you can answer right now, 609-403-0973. Washington gets Debo Samuel. In your opinion, does that make them a legitimate threat in the NFC East?
Well, they already were. This just elevates them. This takes them from being, a good team to a very good team.
Well, I'm saying to the Eagle fans out there, do you now look at Washington differently? I think you beat them 55 whatever in the thing, and it's like, well, they didn't even really belong here, and then we blasted them. But do you now look at them with Debo Samuel and say, I'm looking at them differently now. I'm looking at them as a legitimate threat that they could win the division. Because it's one thing, there's one thing to being a wild card team. That's cute. Winning the division, getting home games, that puts you in a different stratosphere. Washington was cute last year. Fun story. They had an upset win. They made it all the way there. Nice little, I think it's added to the rivalry in the NFC East now. That helps. I think that is something that's pretty cool. But do you take them more seriously now? Do you take them more seriously than you did 48 hours ago?
I would say yes, but not literally because of Debo. I'm taking them more seriously because they're willing to make a move like acquiring Debo. That's like a signal that, hey, we're not sitting on our hands here. We're actually getting active.
So the Debo thing does nothing for you?
No, it's not that. It's the idea.
Forget that. I'm talking about the player himself. Like, to me, him and McLaurin now cause some major problems for you. I mean, that's a matchup problem. Cliff Kingsbury, the play designer, he can get him in all sorts of, jet sweeps, and he's the play designer that I think likes to have a weapon like a player like. Now, if Debo still has anything, I don't know, John McMullen brought up on Friday, how much left does Debo have? Is he a declining player because of all the injuries here? I don't know, but I think this is a great system and offense with Cliff Kingsbury, the young quarterback, Terry McLaurin. I think, to me, that makes them a much more difficult team to contend with offensively.
I can see that. I definitely can see where you're coming from. I just feel like the biggest weakness of Washington last year was not their offense. It was their defense. And I think Washington definitely needs to upgrade their defense if they are going to really take that next step beyond what they are. I think that adding Debo, though, to me, is a signal that Washington is serious about winning, while a team like the Cowboys are not.
Joe in Millville chimes in on the text board, 609-403-0973. He says Debo adds nothing. He could actually be a detriment to the team. They will regret that deal. See, I think this is the thought of Debo wanted out of San Francisco. Now the other team that gets him, you're going to think that Debo's going to be the malcontent there. He got out. He got what he wanted. So I don't know that he comes in, opens the door, and says, "Hi, I'm malcontent. Nice to meet you." I think he's now happy that he gets a fresh start.
I don't look at Debo as a malcontent. My problem with Debo is what you just mentioned, what John McMullen said last week. It's the health issue. How many games does he play? Is he a guy who's going to be able to get out there still for 14, 15 games a year, or you're only getting him for 8 to 10?
Health always a question, no question about it. And look, he's been banged up the last couple of years, but when he's healthy, he's as dynamic as a playmaker as anybody in the league. I mean, you can use him in so many different ways. You can give him the ball.
This was a great move by Washington because it's a low-risk move. They didn't give up a lot to get him. Yeah, they're paying him a bunch of money, but, I mean, you got to pay anybody money in this day and age.
Well, and you gave up a fifth-rounder, so it was worth to take a flyer. Now, McLaurin, who's been one of the – that's the thing for me. McLaurin has been – now, I know the one game when they played against McLaurin, they really shut him down pretty good.
Right, did. The second time they played, he had a better game, but that was also –
But he's had good games against him in the past.
Right.
So my point is, he's the only weapon they've really ever had.
Sure.
They've never had anybody else. Now, you have to account for that and Debo Samuel.
Now, you have to bring back Slay. No, I'm just kidding.
609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. For those of you watching the show on the X platform and on YouTube, if you notice that I'm trying to scratch my eye and I have this brace on my elbow. My elbow is throbbing. I must have tennis elbow or tendonitis so bad. I actually have a brace on underneath my shirt. You can't see it on the video.
I wouldn't have known you had it unless you had told me that earlier.
It's one of those Velcro straps that you put on your forearm to take pressure off your elbow.
It's not the most obvious thing.
Well, no, you can't see it if I have a shirt on. I just said it's underneath my shirt. But it's so painful that I couldn't even lift my coffee mug this morning. I could not lift the coffee mug to take a sip out of it with my right hand. And this just came out of the blue 2 days ago. I had no problems with this, and then, bam, it just nailed me. And I can't even lift my hand up to, scratch my nose. And I'm, looking at the video here, and I'm thinking to myself, the people watching must be like, what's wrong with this guy? I can't reach my nose because my elbow hurts so bad. 48, man. Doesn't feel great. Unbelievable.
Either you slept wrong or you need to be one of those people who need to start wearing those compression braces.
I gotta get it checked out or something. But I can literally put my finger on the spot in my elbow that is throbbing. I can feel the actual place. But for those of you watching, that's why I look a little ridiculous. I can't reach I'm I can't scratch my nose. All right, let me get some more text messages here. 609-403-0973, 609-403. I want to go back to Phil's thing real quick about the linebackers, too. We have, with Zach Bond here, a huge decision to make, Philadelphia. Say we, Roseman. And that is whether or not they have a number to where they have to cut off and say, we cannot. Because I just rattled off to you, Phil, how many different teams that I think, and two of them are in your own division.
Right.
Washington and Dallas. Those two teams, I think, will make a play and say, let's drive the price up on Zach Bond. Now, I don't know that Dallas is savvy enough to do that. They're run by a bunch of idiots. But Washington certainly is smart enough.
By the way, did you read anything into Jerry Jones declining to speak to the media in Indianapolis last week?
I didn't know that I didn't see that he did.
So for those who don't know, what happened was Jerry was late for his media availability. And then when he got to Indianapolis, he declined to talk to the media because he said he had other more important meetings to go to.
Good for him. Maybe he's finally cutting himself off from the media. He needs to. He also needs to, if you're Jerry Jones, he needs to be one of the teams that I would say, hey, let's make an offer to Zach Bond and try to drive the price up. Washington, I think, could be involved in that as well. Hey, let's make a play, not to drive the price up, but let's get this guy here. Let's get this guy on our defense. If I'm Washington and I'm Dallas, I need linebacker help, right? Both those teams.
Do. Yes.
Both those teams need linebacker help.
100%.
So, and by the way, Dallas, if you're Dallas, you go double dipping possibly into the Philadelphia Eagle.
Milton Williams?
You take a look at what
well, they just franchise tagged what's his name. So.
Yeah. You can you threw me off my train of thought. Oh, you could go, hey, Zach Bond. Now they're not smart enough to figure out how to stack these contract offers.
No, they're not.
Zach Bond, they need a
linebacker.
Mekhi Becton, they need a guard.
Yeah, Zach Martin's retiring.
You could make a case that if they want to try to do the 1-year deal for Darius Slay, they need a corner, right? They could use a running back. You say, hey, Gainwell, you want to come down here? And another thing they could use is a D tackle, Milton Williams. Could they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and say, hey, we're going to take your 5 free agents and shift them over here? That could be something that Dallas looks into. That's some of their biggest needs. You look at Washington. Washington needs an edge guy. Do they go after Josh Sweat? They need an offensive tackle. Do they take Becton and move him to tackle? They just got Debo, so you check the wide receiver thing off their list. Linebacker, they could go after Bond, and they need a corner. They could go get Slay. The NFC East, if I'm those two teams, I'm saying to Philadelphia, you got availabilities, we have needs, let's make some calls.
Listen, what you said is very calculated and smart, and that's why it will not happen.
Listen, I think Dallas, I think Washington.
You know who would do that if they ran an NFL team? Raymond Reddington would do that. But Raymond Reddington does not run an NFL team, so that's why it wouldn't happen.
I think Dallas is run by morons, so we're not worried about that. I think, ironically, Washington, owned by Josh Harris, has the right people in place to be smart enough to do something like this.
By the way, Adam Peters was part of the process of drafting Debo Samuel in San Francisco.
Definitely think that Washington is smart enough to kick the tires on some of the Philadelphia free agents. 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. By the way, the Sixers game tonight has an interesting little twist to it. Have you seen this story?
What's the twist?
So we know that NBC will be getting the NBA package starting next season.
Yep.
So for the next couple games, or this game tonight, there's another game this week. I think it's a Boston game. Mike Tirico will be on the play-by-play tonight with Alaa Abdelnaby, so that Mike Tirico can start to get some NBA reps under his belt, because he will be taking over as the lead play-by-play guy for NBC's NBA coverage. So he will be on play-by-play tonight. Kate Scott apparently will be doing the pregame show with maybe Lynham and Mark Jackson, or she will be like Zoom off during the playoffs. Used to go to the studio.
Yeah.
She will be there, but she will not be doing the play-by-play tonight. Gotcha. Tirico will be doing the play-by-play tonight for the game.
I feel bad for Tirico. I wish the Sixers was a better team.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And Portland's not any good either.
No.
Portland
got some interesting young players, though. So at least it should be fun to watch. Maybe like if you're not paying attention to the score.
Matt K-May Courthouse. Mike, what's the projected salary cap for the Eagles? They just saved like $4 million, so I think it's like $9 million. I think they're at now.
They're getting close to $10 million now in terms of total free space, but we know that number is going to go up for a variety of reasons, just because of different contract holds being released coming up.
And there's not a lot of guys that can be cap casualties for the Eagles. There's not a lot of veteran guys that you're going to see like cut from them.
But there's a lot of guys who are available for extensions, and you can if you can find some of these guys who are willing to take some new extension money, throw them some signing bonuses, you can definitely free up some money. I pull up the full list, but I know that there's I think there's 4 or 5 guys who are available for that.
Yeah, a couple quick more texts. Says Debo to Washington. I agree. He fits the offense, but a lot left to happen for Washington. Yeah, I think Washington's on the right track. I think they got good people running them. He also says, what do we think the Slay release signals for potential moves? I don't think they're going to be involved in free agency at corner. I think that Rodgers, they'll bring him back. Don't be surprised if they go draft somebody in the third or fourth round as well. 609-403-0973. Got a couple more text messages. Pete and Wildwood, definitely tennis elbow, Mike. Yeah, I agree, Pete. I just don't know how randomly I got that. Just came out of right field. Just like, whoa, one day my elbow hurt. I like to say it was from maybe playing tennis or something active, but that's the odd part about it. I wasn't doing anything with the elbow.
Well, that's probably part of the problem is that it's probably
dormant.
Yeah, and you haven't kept it active. So then when you did whatever you did, it was like, I hate you, Mike Gill.
This hour brought to you by Broadleys Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning. Call 609-390-3907, online, broadleys.net. When we come back, Scott Lauber covers the Phillies. He is in Clearwater with the team. What is the biggest storylines right now? What has he learned about this crew through 2 weeks of spring training? That's coming up next, the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. All right, 327, a Sports Bash Monday here on a kind of a cold, chilly day, but down in Florida, it has been beautiful. It has been nice, and the Phillies have continued to get their off-season, spring training season moving here, and there's some interesting stories kind of emerging in a time where we didn't think there would be all that much going on. What are some of the biggest things that Scott Lauber has seen? He covers the Phillies for the Philadelphia Inquirer, at Scott Lauber on the X platform, and, of course, the Phillies. Many people, Scott, think, hey, they brought the same team back, not a lot going on down there. But for you, what is something that has maybe stood out in watching about a week's worth of spring training games now?
Hey, Mike. Yeah, I mean, look, I understand all that. I'm actually kind of writing something to that effect today that, look, there's not, a glitzy new name here, and there's not, major roster drama. Everyone's healthy for the most part. So, if you want, headline-grabbing news, Phillies camp is not exactly the place for you right now, but I think that's probably my main takeaway is that they're a team that won 95 games last year, and they have really high hopes for this year as well. And so what you want is for the most boring spring training you could possibly have. And, there's a lot there, though, for the baseball fan to chew on still. There are bench spots that are up for grabs. There are spots at the end of the roster. There's some lineup chatter. There's rotation chatter, who should start after Zach Wheeler, that kind of thing. So there's a lot still for the baseball fan to kind of chew on, but, not a whole lot of what you'd call drama. And I think that's the main thing that I've taken away is that they can do things like, experiment with the lineup, whether it's Trey Turner batting leadoff or, they can fiddle around with, some new pitches, and they can take a look at Edmundo Sosa in the outfield and things like that are, interesting to baseball fans, but, kind of like, I guess, first world issues, so to speak, if you're a baseball team, and those are the ones you want to have, are the things that are not going to, that are not going to be, sort of life and death for your roster. If you can sort of settle some of those in spring training, you're in pretty good shape.
I want to get to the lineup in a bit, but first, yesterday we saw Christopher Sanchez, Luzardo through. I thought Sanchez, I'm watching on TV, so obviously you could tell the velocity's up. But for me, Scott, last year he comes out of nowhere and has this breakout year, and you're like, is that who he is? Does he take another step forward? After watching him early now, do you have a thought on whether he is taking a step forward? Is he kind of is what we saw? What is your take on what we've seen so far from Sanchez and what he might be in 2025?
Well, if he is what we saw, that's a pretty good pitcher. As you mentioned, he really took a step forward last year. He threw 180 innings. That, to me, was maybe the most impressive thing he did last year because he'd never gotten close to that number before. So he showed durability. He showed stuff. He showed command. He started game 2 of a playoff series, so it tells you what kind of a year he had. So if he were to just repeat last year, they will sign for that, and they will take that, and they will be happy with that. But they also believe internally that there's a ceiling that he can still reach that's higher than what he did last year. And he's working on his slider a little bit. He's got the great changeup. He's someone who they think could even be better. He's throwing harder, I think, believe it or not, than he did last year. He was the guy, you remember, who kind of like took a little off the velocity last year in order to harness the command. But the velocity never went anywhere, and they think that now that he's able to lock in that command, that he could add back some of the velocity and combine the two and be elite. He was an all-star last year. As I said, he started game 2 of a playoff series. That's already a pretty good pitcher right there, and they think he could be even better than that.
Yeah, there's no reason to think he won't be with what we saw in his spring training debut the other day. But what about Luzardo? I know they traded for him. He was injured last year. But there's a guy that if you don't really know who he was, if you're not paying attention to the Marlins, you might say, okay, what am I thinking that this guy could be this year?
Yeah, so you only have to go back 2 years, right, to the wild card series in 2023. He started game 1 against Zach Wheeler. at Citizens Bank Park. I understand Sandy Alcantara was hurt at the time for the Marlins, but, he was their game one starter, and he's got, elite stuff. He's got top of the rotation kind of stuff. Now, can he stay healthy for the full year? Last year he had injury issues in Miami that kind of short-circuited his year. Can he continue to get better? These are all questions that he's going to have to answer, but, there's no question this stuff is really good, and you've seen that early on in camp. You've also seen him look healthy, and so if they can keep him that way and keep him in the rotation all year long, I think they've got themselves a guy who, maybe he's their fifth starter in terms of like if you had to order these guys, but he's got way better stuff than a fifth starter has. So, again, another guy who's got upside in addition to something of a track record already, and they think that he makes them just better and deeper, as they go on here.
Talking with Scott Lauber from the Philadelphia Inquirer here. What does that mean for the other guys, Scott? Sanchez and then Painter down the line. Do you foresee a six-man rotation, a trade, someone going to the bullpen? How do you think that materializes? Any indication yet?
No, not yet. I mean, so they're once through the rotation, basically. Once through the rotation. I know Sanchez has pitched twice. Wheeler pitches tomorrow. Ranger Suarez will pitch tomorrow as well. So he'll get his first time out in the game. So once they get through tomorrow, all of their starters will have at least started one time, all of their projected five. So, I mean, it's still a long way to go, and they'll still hold their breath, right? Every time those guys go out there, they will hold their breath that they all stay healthy, and if they can break camp on March 24th with 5 healthy starters plus Andrew Painter at some point later in the season, we can then begin to ask the question, how does Taijuan Walker fit in? We can ask the question, if they stay healthy through the first couple of months of the season, 2-3 months, where does Andrew Painter fit in? I do think at some point they'll go to a 6-man if they're all healthy. I just think it's going to help keep everyone healthy. I mean, Suarez and Luzardo in particular are two guys who, in the past have had trouble making it through a full season without going on the IL at some point. So if there's a way to lighten their load a little bit through the middle of the season and keep them both healthy, a 6-man rotation might be the way to do that. So, look, I think you got a long way to go from here to there, and we all know that pitchers get hurt and injuries happen. The Phillies have been about as good as it gets at keeping their pitchers healthy relative to other teams, like even the Dodgers, right? Look at the Dodgers last year, had a ton of pitching injuries. The Dodgers won the World Series, but let's not forget that they started an opener in Game 4 of the World Series because they had pretty much run out of pitching. So, everybody has injuries. So if the Phillies are asking the question of how do we get enough innings once Andrew Painter comes up or this and that, then that means that everyone's healthy and their rotation's in pretty good shape.
All right, Scott, last thing on the pitching. Let's look at, Walker, what his deal is and how he plays into the decisions that get made. Taijuan, that is. Is he a bullpen guy? Is there other guys is there competition still in that bullpen? Because I know Rob said, well, he might be in consideration for the 5th spot, but I can't imagine he gets that.
I would think it would take an injury, right? I think that's kind of what Thompson meant was like, we're going to stretch him out. We're going to keep him stretched and working as a starter because it's always easier to scale a guy back and put him in the bullpen than it is to stretch him out and make him a starter. So Walker will continue to build as a starter. They were encouraged by what they saw yesterday, better velocity, which creates more separation for the splitter to work well. That's really his pitch. So when his fastball is 89, it's a lot harder for that splitter to be effective because there's not as much difference in velocity from the fastball to the splitter. When the fastball is 93, 94, well, that makes the splitter a whole lot better. They saw more separation and more velocity yesterday, so that's a good thing. If he stays healthy and if the rest of the starters stay healthy, though, there isn't a spot for him in the rotation. So maybe he goes into the bullpen as a multi-inning guy. If he continues to pitch well in spring training, they might have the ability to move him late in the spring There are always teams that are going to need pitching, starting pitching in particular. And maybe there's someone who's out there willing to take him in a trade. That said, he's also owed $36 million over the next 2 years, $18 million each year, this year and next. So it's hard to see the Phillies, even if he pitches well in spring training, it's hard to see the Phillies being able to trade him without picking up all or most of that money. And if they're going to have to pick up all or most of that money, there's an argument to be made that he's most useful to them in their bullpen as a sort of like an insurance policy in case his starter does go down. But they've also they have Painter coming at some point later in the year. Joe Ross was signed as kind of a swingman, multi-inning guy, swingman in the bullpen. So their depth is better than it was last year. But, again, I think, if they get toward the end, if they get to that week of March 17th, that final full week of spring training, and everyone is still healthy and Walker is still pitching well, then it's a conversation that they're going to have in terms of like, well, should we see what we can get for this guy? Should we hold on to him? There is a spot in the bullpen. No one is really claiming it right now in terms of like the last seat in the bullpen, Max Lazar, and there are some others who are in competition for that. Those guys can go back to the minor leagues without waivers and whatnot. So you can keep Taijuan Walker in the bullpen if you want to. And it's just going to be a matter of whether or not he pitches well enough and how things look 2 weeks from now.
All right, Scott, let's go to the lineup. I know that a lot of people see all these different lineups. Some days Turner leads off. Some days Schwarber leads off. Some days Schwarber hits 2. Some days Harper hits 2. One day Schwarber or Turner is with the split squad, and he's hitting leadoff there. What are you making of the batting order and how important that will be to this year's team's success?
Yeah, that's spring training, Mike, as you well know. Like you don't really have your full lineup playing at the same time until the final week. In the meantime, there's however many guys there are in camp right now, 60-something guys in camp, and everyone's going to play until they start to cut down and send some guys to the minors. So you're never going to have your full lineup. So, but they are doing some experimenting right now. They are looking at Turner in the leadoff spot when he plays. They are looking at Schwarber in the leadoff spot when he plays. Of course, they've seen a lot of Schwarber in the leadoff spot the last 3 years, and they know what that looks like. But I wrote something over the weekend too, and in all honesty, it doesn't really matter. Like as long as you have the right hitters hitting in the right parts of the lineup, as long as you don't lose your mind and suddenly bat Bryce Harper ninth, so he comes to the plate, the least amount, right? As long as your three best hitters, and I think most people would agree their three best hitters are Harper, Turner, Schwarber. As long as they are 1, 2, 3 in some order at the top of the lineup so that they're getting to the plate as often as possible, that whether you bat them 1, 2, 3 or 2, 3, 1 or, however you order them, it's really going to only amount to a handful of runs for the balance of the season. So to me, what's really interesting about the lineup is not so much how they order 1, 2, 3. And if I had to guess today, I think maybe Trey Turner is the leadoff hitter, at least to start the season, but we'll see. They've done a lot of winning with Schwarber in the leadoff spot, and so I think they're going to have a hard time walking away from that. But my point is, regardless of how they order those three at the top, I think it's going to be way more interesting to kind of see what they do as you move through the lineup. Like, are they going to commit to Brandon Marsh as an everyday player for a little while, including against lefties, and just see what that looks like, see what the production's like? And if he does not hit lefties, or if Max Kepler does not hit lefties, and you run into a situation where one or both does not play every day, what do you do from there? Like, is Johan Rojas the guy to be the right-handed hitting outfielder to play against lefties? Is Edmundo Sosa an option for them in the outfield to go out there and be a right-handed hitting outfielder for them against lefties? How do they optimize their lineup lower in the lineup so that maybe you can squeeze some more runs that way rather than, I know we focus so much on, and I'm guilty of it as much as anyone, on who's going to hit leadoff and, are they going to split Schwarber and Harper at the top, split the two lefties, and how is that all going to play out? Ultimately, you run people way smarter than me have run the projections, and every team's got their own projections, and pretty much the stat people and the scout people agree that it doesn't really matter, at the tippy top of your order. As long as you've got the personnel right, the order doesn't matter. The order is a lot more important as you go through the lineup to sort of see, all right, is this guy an everyday guy? Can we do better against lefties or against righties, get a better platoon advantage if we do something different? And that's kind of where I'm really interested in seeing, specifically in left field and center field, how that all shakes out.
Now, Scott, the one configuration we saw was Schwarber 2, Harper 3. It would imagine that because everybody just figures, they'll break up the lefties. It seems under that configuration that would not bother them to hit those two guys back to back, or is that just a spring training thing? Don't read into it.
I'm not sure yet. I've asked Rob Thompson directly, and he doesn't have a clear answer yet. In part, I think, because he's still hashing it out in his own mind. Look, to me, if Schwarber and Harper hit lefties the way they hit them last year, you got no problem batting them back to back, because Kyle Schwarber hit 300 against lefties last year. I don't know if that's going to happen again this year, but if it does, I have no concern. I mean, if you want to go get your best lefty out of your bullpen in the seventh inning and have him face Harper and Schwarber, I don't really care. I have confidence that either of those guys are going to hit your guy. So I don't necessarily need a righty in between them. Now, they might choose to do that. They could split them up with, you could lead off Trey Turner and still split up the two lefties with, let's say, Alec Bohm. And now maybe Harper hits second and Schwarber hits fourth, or Schwarber hits second and Harper hits fourth with Bohm in the middle. I mean, you can go ahead and you can do that. Harper made the point early in camp, hey, if I wasn't hitting fourth in game 5 of the division series a couple of years ago in 22 when he hit the Bedlam at the Bank home run, right? If he's batting third and not fourth in that game, well, he's leading off that inning instead of batting with Real Muto on first base. So, and then the moment doesn't happen. So, I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world if Harper hit fourth. One thing that Thompson has been clear about is that he doesn't want Schwarber or Harper hitting any lower than fourth. So he's leaving himself open there to, if he wants to lead off Turner and he wants to split the lefties, he can do that. And either of those two left-handed hitters could still be in the top 4.
Right.
And I think that's what he thinks is most important.
Scott Lauber, a couple of quick nuggets with you. Backup catcher, any clarity there? How do you think that shakes out?
Still got a long way to go. 3 weeks of camp to go. But, look, if I was a betting man, and I'm not, but if I was, I'd go with the guy who doesn't have options, and that's Rafael Marchand. So, I mean, we'll see. I know Rob Thompson has said the contract stuff does not necessarily play into his thinking. If one guy is really outplaying the other guy, it doesn't matter. I wonder whether the front office would sign off on that, because you want to preserve as much depth as you can. So I think Garrett Stubbs is in the unique position of being the incumbent underdog in this case, and really Marchand, if he's healthy and has a good enough spring, I think the smart thing to do is keep Marchand in the big leagues, send Stubbs to AAA, and I think you're going to need them both.
Last one, I guess, with the roster, is there I would imagine it's a bullpen guy, but is there somebody that maybe the listeners and Phillies fans just don't know who the guy is, never heard him, wasn't here, that will be on the opening day roster in that bullpen? I would imagine that last roster spot is kind of up for grabs too, with Wilson out. So those two spots there, is there a pitcher that maybe people aren't familiar with that's going to make this team? Same with the position player.
I think it's going to take. I think it would take multiple injuries, or I think back to last year, and they had that flu that ran through the clubhouse at the end of the season and knocked out Orion Kerkering from the opening day roster, and there were a few other guys, and so you had I think Luis Ortiz was on the opening day roster, and Junior Marte was on the opening day roster, and some guys who on March 3rd of last year we would not have pegged as opening day roster guys. I think it would take something similar to that, or a bunch of injuries to kind of, because it's really a pretty well set roster, except for that last spot in the bullpen, which could go to Taijuan Walker, could go to someone else. and then that last spot on the bench, which depending on, whether Sosa can play the outfield, center field in particular, whether Rojas, who's had this little shoulder injury that's prevented him from playing defense so far, is that something that a week from now we're still talking about, or is he on the, in games as an outfielder by then? That could open up a spot for someone like, it's possible that both Clemens and Kennedy could make the team if Rojas went to AAA, or if Rojas wasn't ready, or if Sosa can't play the outfield. So there are some things here, but I don't think that's the question. I think you're asking, like, who have I not heard of who's going to make the roster? And I don't think there is that guy. I sort of wish Gabriel Lincones Jr. was a right-handed hitter.
Yeah.
He's a left-handed hitter, and he's having a great camp. But I don't think he can. I don't think he squeezes his way through, not unless one of the lefty hitting outfielders, Marsh or Kepler, gets hurt or something like that. And then we could say, well, could this guy actually push for a spot on the team? I don't see that spot being available for someone like that. So I don't think so. I don't think it's going to be someone you've never heard of. But again, lots of things can happen in 3 weeks, and we'll see how it plays out.
A rare spring day off in Clearwater for the Phillies, and they will continue the Grapefruit League portion tomorrow, and more of these battles and things. And, of course, injuries could always happen, so that puts a wrench in things. Scott Lauber from the Inquirer covering it all with us here on the Sports Bash, at Scott Lauber on the X platform. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Mike.
Always a pleasure to catch up with the very knowledgeable Scott Lauber from the Philadelphia Inquirer here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Couple takeaways is a lot of pitching, right? A lot of pitching, the depth in the pitching. He likes Sanchez. He liked what he saw from Luzardo. I got 3 things about the Phillies that I'm excited about. I'll share them with you coming up on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. All right, 354. Thanks to Scott Lauber. Hey, I want to tell you about my friends at Game Day Men's Health, Egg Harbor Township. 1 in 4 men over 30 in the U.S. have low testosterone levels. Whether you're chasing peak performance or simply want to be your best, Game Day Men's Health is defining a new era of men's health. You know, I've been talking about this elbow problem I have. Well, those guys can take care of it. They've got the machinery in place right here in South Jersey. It's one-of-a-kind type of rehab. So if you have aches, pains, low T, ED, anything as a guy as we get older that you think you need to get checked out, great spot right here in Egg Harbor Township. Game Day Men's Health will get you back in the game, 609-365-7088, or visit their English Creek location in Egg Harbor Township, or go to GameDayMen'sHealth.com for more information. They got an on-site lab. You can go get your blood work done there. You can get your testosterone levels checked in just 15 minutes, complete medical evaluation, and a customized game plan for you. Check them out, Game Day Men's Health in Egg Harbor Township. We're going to check out what Darius Slay's release means for the Eagles. How much money do they save? Will they bring him back? And what will they do to replace him? That's all coming up next during Football at 4 with Jeff Mosher right here on the Sports Bass Live 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, live video streaming on the X platform, YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. Subscribe, hit the like button. Actually, smash the like button. Slam it, bam it, upside down and jam it. Let's go. Football at 4 is coming up with Jeff Mosher with all the latest on Darius Slay and why the Eagles decided to move on from him and how they'll replace him. That's coming up next here on the Sports Bash, live on 97.3 ESPN. Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Jeff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. He's here to talk a little bit about the Birds, and they made their first significant move of the offseason today. They cut ties with Darius Slay. Did they cut ties for good? Could he be back? Well, that's why Jeff Mosher's here. He has all the answers to these key questions, and he joins us for today's edition of Football at 4 on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. What's going on this Monday there, Jeff Mosher? How are you, my friend?
I'm great. I'm watching you here on the YouTube StreamYard stream. I see you got that nice Phillies zip up. It's getting me excited for baseball. I'm in the middle of one of those email fantasy baseball drafts, but I'm still focused on football, Mike. We got free agency starting at this time next week with the legal tampering period. And of course, as you mentioned, the Eagles making moves today. And here we go with the offseason.
Well, they made the first significant move of the offseason. Now, let's first start with this. Was this a surprise, or is this something that was to be foreseen and expected?
I mean, definitely not a surprise. Even Darius Slay himself had been talking about not sure if he'd be back, with the Eagles next year during the end of the season, and in the Super Bowl media circuit, he was talking about it. So not a surprise at all. He's 34 years old. He's been dealing with some knee problems for a little while now. Had a procedure on that. He's expensive, so they have an opportunity to say, well, expensive for, what the Eagles are facing. You have two young stud corners in Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. And so we'll see. Obviously they're going to part ways with him as a June 1 designation. And I think we'll get our answers, Mike, in free agency as to how we think the Eagles will use Cooper DeJean. If they go out and try to get a different outside corner, then whether it's the draft or free agency, then they're going to keep DeJean at nickel. And I know that there's some momentum in the building from some to keep DeJean at nickel. But if they don't make a move and they don't bring Isaiah Rodgers back, and you're looking at maybe like Keely Oringo or Ricks, then it probably signifies that they're going to move DeJean outside and then try to replace the nickel spot.
Yeah, okay, so there's a lot here that Jeff just broke down. Let's start with this. He said a couple of weeks ago he hopes to play one more year. He actually said on this podcast with Amon-Ra St. Brown that he definitely wants to play one more year. He did indicate either Philadelphia or Detroit. How likely do you think it is that Philadelphia would want him and bring him back, obviously at their price, but do you think they're ready to move on?
Well, they've already determined that he's not a $16 million a year corner. I think that's what the cap number was if they had kept him on, right? I know they saved $4 million, but I don't, for his age and his knee issues lately, I don't know what kind of contract he's going to get out there. I would be shocked if it was more than a year. It might be a 2-year deal, but really just guaranteed money in year one. So that's really like a 1-year deal. And I don't know if it'll be anything north of 7 or 8 million. So the question then becomes, and I heard you and Josh talking about this because Darius has talked about it on his own podcast. He wants to play another year, but I don't think he wants to play another year on a really low contract because he still sees himself as good enough to be a starter. And I don't think he wants to give anybody some kind of big play Slade, big discount, right? So he's got children. He can go watch them play high school sports. If he feels like it's just not worth it to come back on a really low contract, then he can just walk off into the sunset. And so I think that's the big chess match here is do the Eagles or another team offer him enough to at least keep him interested in playing for another year?
Right. Jeff Mosher, Football at 4 here. Darius Slay gets released today. That's the next thing. They'll save like $4.3 million against the cap. He will be 34. He had a pretty solid season last year. So let's talk a little bit about what's next for the Eagles. I'm fascinated by what could happen with Cooper DeJean. Does Vic Fangio value him so much in the role that he had him and find that role so hard to duplicate, and that it might be easier? And I know that sounds weird to say it's easier to find an outside guy because that's a very important position. But how do you see if they move on from Slay? Is it an in-house guy, a draft, a free agent? DeJean, how do you break that down?
Yeah, and if they do wind up bringing back Slay for a year, on a much lower deal, then you know that he's going to be the outside corner with Quinyon Mitchell and that Cooper DeJean will be the nickel back. And it's a really important role that DeJean played in Vic Fangio's defense, because as a nickel, you're technically an extra corner defensive back, but really you're kind of like a linebacker as well, a weak side backer. You can blitz. You're a big part of the sim pressure package of a 4-man rush that you can't be too much if you're an outside corner, if at all. So there's a lot of good reasons to want Cooper DeJean to stay at nickelback. However, I will say, and this is really more of a conversation for, I guess, a year or two from now, Cooper DeJean's a good player, good athlete, and those guys always want to get paid like good players and good athletes. And as you know, Mike, nickelbacks do not get paid the same way as outside corners. So I don't know if this will be a conversation for after the 2025 season between his agency and the Eagles saying, hey, you've got a guy who can play outside corner. You're keeping him in nickel because it's best for you, but it's not best for him and his second contract. So you either have to make this work or move him to the outside or overpay him as a nickel knowing he can play outside. But again, that is a conversation down the road.
It's a conversation down the road. We brought it up earlier. I said, because I don't look at Cooper as the kind of guy that would press it. You mentioned his agent could be the one that says, because I don't think Cooper's the guy. I don't know. I've never talked to Cooper. I don't know him, but it doesn't seem to me that, like, if Vic Fangio says, hey, we want you to say it's slot corner, and he's like, nah, coach, that's not happening. I'm an outside guy. I feel like he would do whatever best for the team, and that's what puts him in a weird situation.
Well, I think I don't want to put myself in Cooper DeJean's head. I think most guys on rookie contracts are willing to do what it takes for the first year or two, but he is a competitor, and most competitive guys want to show that they can rub elbows with the best at their position. And I'm sure at Iowa, he was an outside corner who played a little bit of nickel. So I don't want to just assume that because he's like this small town Iowa kid that, he's always going to play nice for 4 years. And I've seen plenty of guys from all walks of life and all backgrounds decide at some point that they want to be considered the best of the best.
Yeah, no, it's funny because we were talking earlier, like that guy has been on the media tour. I mean, since the Super Bowl, he has done everything. I mean, from North Wildwood out to Iowa. I mean, he has been everywhere. It seems like the kind of guy that's just like living the dream. I'll do whatever. But you're right. No, his agent could say, and that could be, but I guess in your opinion, his role in what he did at that spot, nickel corner, I mean, he was almost so far and away the best guy at that position. Like, I don't know, what he was able to do, did that allow the Eagles defense to be, or like if you moved him to the outside, can somebody, I don't want to say replicate, but is it such a drop-off that you're like, I might have to actually keep him there because it might be easier to find someone to play outside?
I think that the question you're asking is the actual root question the Eagles have to figure out is which is easier to replace, the outside corner or the nickel back in Vic Fangio's defense. And like 9 times out of 10, someone's going to tell you the outside corner. But when you watch the Eagles defense last year, you would say, hey, you know what? Slay was in and out at times. They had to play Rodgers. Rodgers actually made a couple of plays. I don't know if anybody could have, when Maddox made one play, he made literally, I know it was an important play, Super Bowl, but he also gave up a bunch of plays when he had to go in and play that nickel spot. But I still think at the end of the day, when the Eagles are evaluating their options, and do remember the Eagles, we reported this quite early when they drafted Cooper DeJean, that they, unlike a lot of teams we spoke to, Adam and I spoke to a lot of teams thought he was a safety. A lot of teams thought he was a safety / nickel. The Eagles drafted him with the mindset that he could play the outside, and they still believe that. So not only did they have to figure out where his value is best right now, is it nickel or outside? But if they want his value to be at nickel and they bring in outside options, they also have to evaluate, well, is this guy I'm about to sign to my outside corner better than Cooper DeJean, what we projected for Cooper DeJean to be? Because you're only as good as your weakest link. And if you're not putting a quality or adequate outside corner out there just to keep Cooper DeJean at nickel, you're hurting your defense. Because theoretically, Mike, it is easier to replace the nickelback, and you can certainly find someone in the draft or free agency who can play that position fairly well, who understands the position, who gives you that like blitz versatility. I'm not saying there's 100 of them out there that are great, but it's hard to be great at every position. So they do have to figure out not only what's best for the defense, but where Cooper DeJean is going to help them the most.
Okay, let's get a couple thoughts from Jeff on this. Isaiah Rodgers is set to become a free agent next week. Is he a guy that they would, if they bring him back, does that tell you what you need to know?
100%. And, that's something they can do now. They don't have to wait for the legal tampering period. They don't have to wait. I mean, they could do it while we're having this conversation because he's an in-house free agent. And now that they've already decided to make that move with Darius Slay, you can imagine that they're at least having conversations with Rodgers and his folks.
How were they on when he was on, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, Slay missed a lot of time with this knee. Yep. Did Rodgers, in your mind and to their mind, play well enough that they would feel comfortable bringing him back to be the starting outside corner?
It's my understanding they want him back, so if whether that's to be a definitive starter or to say, hey, we're bringing you back and giving you the opportunity. We have Ricks, we have Ringo. We may draft a corner in the first, second, third round. Who knows? But our understanding is that they want him back. And you would have to think if they did have him back, he would be the lead candidate to start outside opposite Quinyon Mitchell. And that would keep Cooper DeJean at the nickel spot.
Okay, over at Inside the Birds, you wrote about this. I did not see you mention the other guys, Ringo, Rick, any of those guys. They would not be someone they'd feel comfortable starting over there to replace Slay?
Comfortable is an interesting word. They're on the team. They've put time into Ricks and Ringo, so they certainly value them to an extent. Ringo's become a very good special teams player. Ringo is a strange player in that he can run straight line very well for a guy who's big, but he's not loose hipped. And so he's not ideal as your starting outside corner. I don't think I know that's how the Eagles view it as right now. It's not ideal for him to be your starting outside corner. Now you bring him to camp with 3 other guys and he has a great camp and he's, it's hard to kind of learn looseness in your hips. You either have it or don't. Right. But you can improve, and you can improve mentally in a game that helps you compensate like TJ Edwards did for your lack of natural athleticism, right?
Yeah.
So you give him the opportunity, but as we sit here right now, I know that they don't feel he's the ideal replacement at the outside corner spot.
Okay, I guess the other 2 options are, free agency. You lose Slay. Do you bring in a free agent corner and say, we're going to invest money at that spot, like real money, like an Asante Samuel Jr. is a big name guy who's available, or do you go back through the draft? And obviously these are all options, but
well, don't forget about the sneaky third option, Mike. And Adam and I were just talking to this before I came on air with you, because this is an area where the Eagles really excel at. The sneaky third option of trading for a player who is 3 years into his contract, and for whatever reason, his team hasn't re-signed him. Maybe it's a team with cap issues. Maybe he's good, but the team doesn't want to commit. Like the Bengals, T. Higgins is good, but they're having issues right there. But perhaps there's a corner around the league who's in a similar situation that, say, C.J. Gardner-Johnson was a couple of years ago with the Saints, right? Or, at this time last year, we were saying this about Patrick Surtain because he hadn't yet agreed to a contract extension. There's always players like that. The Eagles got Ronald Darby that way from the Buffalo Bills. I'm trying to think of some other. Timmy Jernigan from the Ravens. I'm trying to act like I know something, like doing the old Brian Windhorst fingers in the air thing. But I am just saying that this is an area that we tend to forget about, that Howie does not forget about and uses to his advantage.
Yeah, and it's funny because, they drafted Quinyon Mitchell and DeJean. I mean, they put draft capital into that position. And over the years, they have gotten all these young corners that they've got a chance to take a look at. And it could be a guy like Isaiah Rodgers who just got off the scrap heap because he was gambling and got suspended. The Colts released him, that they end up picking up, and he's the answer to some of the questions there. I do want to get your thoughts, unless you have anything else to add on Slay and some big picture thoughts, because a week from today, we're going to be talking about somebody, I would imagine.
Absolutely. We've spent so much time talking about guys that the Eagles may or may not keep, and not, as we're doing now, sort of talking about the landscape and what's out there that they might have to bring in to replace.
All right. Let's go to what Washington did.
Yep.
Deebo Samuel for a 5th-round pick. I saw their betting odds didn't change. Plus 1,800 to win the Super Bowl did not change. Still plus 1,800 to win the Super Bowl. So imagine Vegas doesn't think that Deebo Samuel's a big impact. What do you think about what Washington did and what that adds to them? Are they now, in your mind, a way more legitimate threat?
Way more legitimate? I can't say way more. I do think it's a very good move. I know that some Eagles, I guess Eagles Twitter is having fun with it. I've seen all sorts of I don't know, this Drewski guy, I think it is, and a 49 and a Debo, they're all trying to make fun of his weight and everything like that, and saying Debo is overweight and a big dude now. I have a feeling that a change of environment and scenery will be good for Debo. I think the offense that Cliff Kingsbury run with its horizontal nature, it caters really well to how they're going to use him. I think that even if he's somewhat of a declining player than he was 4 or 5 years ago, still probably a better option than say Diami Brown or Noah Brown or maybe even Olamide Zaccheaus. Although I kind of like Olamide Zaccheaus, but still it does.
Yeah, but in a third role.
Yeah. But I don't think it hurts them. I do think it helps them, gives them a nice little weapon. I don't think they're done by any stretch of the means. And to only give up a 5th round pick is, to me, it's a good play for them.
I agree with what you just said, because for me, one of Washington, now their offense wasn't their biggest problem, but adding him to their offense with Kingsbury is a guy I think is going to figure out, much like, listen, he had a very good offensive designer and play caller in San Francisco, but I think McLaurin has been a pain in your ass for the last couple of years, and now he's never really had anybody to play across from him. Now you got not only someone to play across from, a legitimate weapon there. But I also think this is a sign that Washington is taking their swing right now. They think they're there.
Yeah, I think so. I would expect them to be very aggressive, continue to be very aggressive this offseason. I think the best thing that they can do is keep surrounding Jaden Daniels with talent the way Howie did when things were looking pretty bare after 2020. And then all of a sudden you get Devontae Smith, and then you trade for A.J. Brown, and Dallas Goedert becomes the man after they move on from Ertz. And then the offensive line, of course, being the starter for all of that success. So I would say if they could continue to work on that offensive line, that they're going to be pretty good. Defensively, it sounds like they're going to move on from Jonathan Allen, but they had the first round, they had Juice Newton from last year ready to slide in. I imagine they'll get some edge rush. They have a lot of money. So again, they're not done. I think they'll be pretty formidable next year.
They both Dallas and Washington. We were talking about this earlier. I don't know if you were listening at that point, but or watching. Their team needs line up with the Eagles free agents. Like Dallas needs a guard. How about Becton? Dallas needs a linebacker. What about Bond? Dallas needs a corner. Do they bring in Slay for a year? Dallas needs a running back. Do you go after Gainwell? All their team they need a D. Well, I guess they just franchise. What's his name? And Washington, same thing. They need a linebacker. Do you bring? If I'm Washington and Dallas, I'm making a big play for Bond to try to drive the price up.
Well, is Bobby Wagner a free agent? Was that only a 1-year deal? Because Luvu is a really good linebacker. I would think if I'm Washington, I'd probably spend a little more time on my edge rush and my secondary.
Well, and we talk about Washington needs an edge rusher. You go after Sweat. They need a corner. Maybe they bring it just to say, hey, we're coming after you with your own guys.
Yeah, listen, it's been done before, right? That's certainly been done. The Niners signed Javon Hargrave away from the Eagles, and they went to the Super Bowl that year. Yeah. So that's certainly has been done before.
Yeah, Wagner, by the way, yes, he is a free agent. So they need a linebacker to replace Bobby Wagner. You've also got, there was another position that we were talking about. Oh, Washington needs a tackle. Do they take Becton and make him a tackle?
You mean an offensive tackle? I think Becton's going to be a very, very interesting case study for teams. I can see a team committing some big money to him over a short-term deal. And I can also see a team saying, we're just not sure. We don't have Stoutland. We don't have that kind of infrastructure. We're going to pass and go with someone who's a little bit more natural to the position. So we'll see what happens. I do think somebody's probably going to wind up ponying up more money than we think. But I'd be surprised if he got guaranteed money into the third year. I just don't know.
This time next week, we will know probably who is staying and who is going, at least some of the answers to those questions. We'll have a Mosher Monday with Jeff Mosher next week on Football at 4. He'll be back on Wednesday. We'll see if the Eagles make any other decisions and moves with this roster. Darius Slay has been released today. That is the first domino of the 2025 Eagles roster. And, of course, you've heard it right here on the Sports Bash. Football at 4, Jeff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. All right, buddy. See ya.
Take care, buddy.
All right, Jeff Mosher, everybody. And that, of course, is Football at 4 on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app, and, of course, live video streaming on the X platform, YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. You can subscribe, hit the like button. I see a lot of people chatting in the YouTube costume. I like this one here. He says he likes my MG. I like your Phillies shirt. I'm so ready for baseball. Yeah, I'm rocking the Phillies red 3/4 zip today. That's what we went with today for the Monday show. Getting ready for baseball because I said, if you were listening to the early portion of the show, I have 3 things that I'm legitimately excited about for the Phillies this year. We'll talk about that coming up on the Sports Bash Live. Nick Earnshaw has Nick's Nuggets on the way. We'll see what stood out this weekend to Earnshaw. That's coming up in just about 7 minutes from now on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Also, we told you Friday, Joel Embiid done for the season. What's next for the Sixers? All that coming up. And we also don't want to forget about the Flyers. With a win over Winnipeg, Fedotov was the star of the show, and the Flyers now 4 points out of a playoff spot the week of the draft. The week of the trade deadline. What could Danny Briere and Keith Jones be cooking up? Plus tonight at 5:30, what's next for the Sixers? Kevin Pelton from ESPN writes about it at ESPN.com. He shares it with us at 5:30 tonight here on the Sports Bash. All right, 429 Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. A lot of people watching today on the YouTube and X platform at Mike Gill Show. Hit the like button, subscribe, smash it if you will. We're here till 6, hanging out. A lot of people chatting in the comments section, texting on the text board at 609-403-0973. I like this text from our guy Steven Ventnor. 32 and Ringo for Patrick Surtain. Yeah, that's just what I want. Give up the Defensive Player of the Year for Kaylee Ringo. Not happening. Sorry. I like early narcotics, but those college days are way behind me. What's up, Earnshaw? We got some craziness out there. 32 and the window for Patrick Surtain to be traded got pat when the Denver Broncos made the playoffs. That kind of signified that they were out of that mode.
Yeah,
everyone, I like the people too. Like I can't stand that. Just throw players that nobody wants. If you just add players, that'll like entice people. Nobody wants Kaylee Ringo. Nobody wants those level of players. Like that's not getting deals done.
Listen, you could hit force trade on the Madden game that you're playing there to get Pat Surtain in an Eagles uniform. That's about the only way you'll see Patrick Surtain in an Eagles uniform.
The force trade. I got a quick video game beef. The force trade has ruined people's brains because I get trade requests like that all the time. Like, hey, send a draft pick and then throw in 4 guys that nobody wants. They'll say yes. It's like, no, nobody wants Kaylee Ringo. And then they don't want to pay Kaylee Ringo. They'll take the pick, maybe. If you told me 32 without Ringo, that might make me think more of it. The Ringo part of it's now just like, all right, now you're just throwing people in there just to throw. But here's something about video games that I think needs to be fixed. Back in the day, you're playing a game. Now, you used to play the game with your buddy. You sat in the same room and played. You can't even do that anymore. Can you?
Well, yeah, you could still do that, but no one chooses to. It's not as popular as it once was. You could play with anyone in the world. You could not leave your dungeon, your man room.
Right, your friend comes over your house, and these kids stare at each other because they can't play the video game against each other. They actually want to go home so they can play against each other. But you're playing the game. Back in the day, hey, dinner time. You hit the pause button. You came down, you ate, you want to pick your game, right? No more pause.
No more pause.
No pause when you're playing against people all over the country.
Yeah, you can play anyone country. You can play anyone in the world. And, you can force trades all around the world now. So it's a different animal. And the forced trade, it's ruined some people's perception of really what's going on. And you have to look at the Denver Broncos. I mean, they have a really good young quarterback in Bo Nix. They made the postseason. They got a good young team over there. Sean Payton's building a winner, and they're going to be competing over the next few seasons. So they're not going to be trading Pat Surtain anytime soon. I know there was rumblings for it, but that's not going to happen in the coming weeks, months, or even years at this point for the Broncos. They have a bright future with a bright young quarterback over there. They're not going to want to ruin their defense when they have a player like Surtain. They're not going to give him up.
Yeah, that is the Surtain trade is a year too late. He was up, like you could have got him. Now they're on the way up. Like you missed your boat on getting that level of player.
Yeah, they're not moving on from Surtain whatsoever.
The damn coffee, man. My elbow is killing me.
What happened?
I don't know. I must have tennis elbow or something, and I'm trying to lift the coffee up. I can't get my elbow hurts
you can't even get the coffee up. If you're watching on the X platform, the YouTube channel, like Mike said, you got to smash the like button. That's tough. You got tendonitis in there. You've been throwing. What's your velo been dropping, Mike Gill? Is that what's happening?
I've been throwing a football in the backyard. Maybe that's what it's from.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. All right, maybe we got to retire that too. Maybe we got to move on from that and hit the force. Don't throw the football anymore for Mike Gill. All right, let's move along. Nugget number 1. We got to talk about the 76ers a little bit here. And listen, on Saturday, they beat Golden State. Great. I don't want to see them win anymore. That ship has sailed as well. Just like the Surtain thing, that ship has sailed. They can't have the Sixers winning games anymore. You want to have a top draft pick heading into the postseason.
Yeah, I like what Fort Ball said earlier today. He's like, they are the originators of losing, and now here we are 10 years later, they can't figure out that losing is actually a benefit to them.
Yeah, it would work for them. But nugget number 1, a report came out on Saturday on an NBA Countdown, according to Shams Charania, and we do have the audio of this, and it's something that just fascinated me with the Joel Embiid and his knee issue and the 76ers. I want to talk about Joel Embiid and the 76ers not agreeing on where they should be at with his knee problem, how they should handle it. Now, apparently, they're in lockstep. But here's what Shams Charania had to say on Saturday night regarding Joel Embiid and the 76ers' vision for his knee going forward. Take a listen.
This all came to a head over the last couple of weeks, specifically when I'm told Joel Embiid went directly to 76ers owner Josh Harris about the state of his knee and about where the realization he's at with what's in the best interest of him, the organization, as far as a potential shutdown. Because remember, Josh Harris owes Joel Embiid up to $300 million over the next 5 seasons.
All right. Reaction to that, because the fact that Joel Embiid had to go to the top, the guy who owns the team, who should have nothing to do with how they're handling his knee, Mike, I mean, what does this mean for Daryl Morey? What does this mean for Embiid? What does this mean for the future of the Sixers organization? The fact you have your star player going to the owner saying, this is how we should handle my knee. And there was a quote in there that they had fundamental differences over the past month or so from Shams, the Sixers, and Embiid. Fundamental differences on how they should go forward with his knee. Now, apparently, they're all in lockstep with this. I mean, this is just madness at this point.
Well, listen, any player of this magnitude, the owner is generally involved. That's not a surprise. The fact, though, that Embiid throughout, I think the other reporting that was a part of this was really that he has not seen eye to eye with what they should have been doing all season long, and then he finally had to say, listen, like, it's not working. Because a lot of the reporting was that he was being told just to play through it, and that playing through it might help him out, that his knee would kind of almost like mold or form to like the pounding. It's like crazy that we're at this point here. Yeah, the whole thing has been a disaster. Now, if it says they're in lockstep from this point on, that's great. But did you waste this season? Have you wasted part of next season by not being on the same page here? And this is where the Harris owning another team comes into play. I don't care which franchise it is. It's just that maybe he wasn't as hands-on or wasn't around as much as he used to be and, wasn't paying attention to, hey, what's going on? And maybe that's where. Now, there was, our guy Scoop B over the weekend, Josh's buddy there. Who, was he going to be on game night tonight, Scoop B? Not tonight. Maybe this week. He had reported this weekend to watch out for Bob Myers as a name for the – now, that's an easy – I've been mentioning that for a couple of weeks now, that Bob Myers, the former Golden State Warriors GM, is in the Washington Commanders front office. So Scoop B put out a report this weekend, and Scoop's pretty well he's pretty well informed. He certainly has a lot more NBA insight than I would, but his report this weekend that came out basically said that, hey, he's hearing that could be a possibility, that maybe Josh Harris tries to talk to Bob Myers and shifts him over to the Sixers, and that would be one way. See, I'm trying to find out, it's hard. Daryl Morey resigned from Houston.
Right.
He didn't get fired. He didn't he resigned. He just said, okay, the Sixers went after him and brought him here. Is he so disenchanted with that decision here a couple of years later with where they are? I don't know. I don't know what to think about that. But according to Brandon Scoopy Robinson, the Sixers are currently the frontrunners to land Bob Myers in a front office role. League sources saying other teams are involved. Brooklyn has interest. Philly's in the lead. Obviously, he's already working with Josh Harris. So I think that would be an easy, hey, we want to have you help us with the Sixers. But is that in conjunction with Morey? I don't know. I don't know what to read into that. What I can read into that, if it's gotten to this level, that this is something that they didn't want to have to deal with.
Yeah, it's just crazy to me that he had to go straight to the owner. Nobody agreed on his knee. I mean, it's his knee, for goodness sake. You know what I mean? It's Joel Embiid. You would think he would have some validity and a voice in this, essentially, and maybe a stronger voice. It's his knee. He should, let's take the informed opinion of the doctors and then go with what he's comfortable with. I mean, this is someone who is an MVP. He still put up 30 points when he was out there this year in the 19 games he did play. He could put up 30 points at any time. It's just crazy that they couldn't agree on what to do and how to handle this whole situation. It maybe has something to do with Harris owning the other teams, but this is more the president of basketball operations here in Daryl Morey. And I'm glad you bring up the Bob Myers report by Scoop B. We were chatting over Twitter this week, Josh, him and I, over the weekend. And I mean, this is something I couldn't see them working together. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if Bob Myers and Daryl Morey would work together in conjunction to build this team. I think you're picking one or the other. If you're going to bring in Bob Myers, Daryl Morey,
I would agree. My reason of saying conjunction was more if Bob Myers doesn't want to go back to the NBA full time.
Yeah. I mean, I think you could probably convince him. Listen, I mean, he's working with the Commanders a little bit. He's been sitting in the box with Josh Harris at the Commanders games. I feel like you could probably convince him to go back and rebuild a team. I mean, listen, he's a champion. I know he's been there, done that. Like, it's kind of like the same thing. Remember we were talking about the Jets and Howie Roseman rumors earlier in the offseason, right? Like probably during playoff time more so. Like, maybe you want to rebuild something, right? And start from scratch and try and take on that challenge. This could be something for Bob Myers if they move on from Daryl Morey, because it just seems like it's just been one big PR nightmare. Nothing's going right. They're not winning games. The roster construction wasn't great. You went too old. Now you're going younger. Grimes has a big day. It's a great trade that Daryl Morey made, but is it getting you closer to a championship? Maybe you need to bring in that new voice in Bob Myers, because Daryl Morey's made some really good decisions here. I mean, he's drafted well, Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain. He got off the Al Horford contract. He got Quentin Grimes in here, just dropped 44. He's made multiple good moves as the general manager, but overall, the Paul George, that could have been a mistake. Not getting rid of Tobias Harris early enough, that contract to maybe bring in other pieces, that could have been a mistake. The James Harden situation, that's a mistake. Like, there's other reasons where you could justify moving on from Morey and trying to bring in Bob Myers. And Scoop B, with that report, I feel like there's a lot of validity to that.
The obvious connection, he works with Josh Harris. So I'm not going to say that there's no possible way. I think that's foolish. Number one. Number two, Kevin Pelton's going to join us in less than an hour from now. He wrote over at ESPN.com about, like, hey, keeping this team together, the way they formulated the rest of the team was maybe the mistake with Eric Gordon and, older players that you kind of, Kyle Lowry, that you were depending on, Reggie Jackson, to say, hey, now we got more young athletic guards that they're going to get a chance to play the rest of this year. I don't know that excites anybody that if Quentin Grimes, Jared Butler, and whoever are back next year, but it certainly would give you a younger group of guys who don't have as much on their plate, who aren't as important to this team. I'll tell you what, I mean, listen, they won the other night. They're only 2 games out right now. Let me ask you this question. If I told you they won, made the playoffs, got out of the play-in tournament, and then went to a Game 7 in round 2, and I don't know the result, are you taking that, or are you taking the draft pick?
I'm taking the draft pick now. At this point, I mean, Embiid's done for the year. They've shut him down. He's done. You can't have this team go into the postseason with this roster. Paul George is questionable tonight. Maxey's been in and out. He's been hurt throughout the season. I can't go into the playoffs now. The fact that Embiid shut down, you got no shot of going to a championship. So, like, that's now you're definitely done. You had like a 1% chance. Now you have about a 0 because Embiid's done. So, no, you got to take the draft pick. I was very upset that they actually won on Saturday night and beat Golden State. I was actually very mad. I had to turn the game off because I was so frustrated that Quentin Grimes had a big night. So, yes, I would rather have the draft pick than them getting the play-in and just waste everyone's time. They have no shot at winning a championship. At least with Embiid, there's a little bit of hope. There's an ounce of hope because you have that MVP level player there. With no Embiid, forget about it.
Yeah, I agree with you there, by the way. I am not advocating that at all.
Yeah, no, it's what a loss season. What an absolute disaster.
I love that playoff, I said, like, the thing when your team's in the playoffs and you have that hope of a game every single night of, like, hey, go out with the buddies and hang out. It's something to do. Like, I'm going to miss that with the Sixers this year.
I love when they get my hopes up every time around spring, around Mother's Day. They get my hopes up. I enjoy it. And then it all comes crashing down because they find a way to lose in a big moment. But that's the 76ers. Hopefully there's none of that this year. And we can just go into the offseason complaining about how this was a disaster of a season and what free agency moves and trades they will make in the offseason. All right, let's move along. Nugget number 2. We got to talk about the fighting Phillies. And I was just thinking about this over the weekend, Mike. And, this is going to be a really good rotation. And we talked about the rotation last week. And I'm drawing a little bit of comparisons to the hype surrounding the 2011 rotation. The 4 aces, Doc Holliday, Cliff Lee, Roy Oswalt, Cole Hamels. And then you had Joe Blanton as well. It was a solid number 5. But there was a lot of hype around that team. They were covering magazines, etc. I just don't feel the same hype around this rotation. And looking at it, it's probably the best in baseball right now. I mean, you got Zach Wheeler, you got Aaron Nola, Ranger Suarez, Christopher Sanchez, Luzardo. I mean, this is a ridiculous rotation. Has there not been enough hype surrounding this? And should there have been a level of hype to the 2011 team?
I like that one. I agree. This 5 might be better than that 5.
Right.
Wheeler, we talked about this with Rye the other day in the 5 o'clock hour. You can make an argument that Wheeler has been better in Philly than Halladay.
Yeah, you can.
Halladay had 2 better years when he won the Cy Young. His first 2 years were better than any 2 Wheeler years. But Wheeler's career, because Halladay's last 2 years were bad. So Wheeler overall has been better than Halladay. Now, Nola and Lee, similar. Okay?
Right.
Hamels and, I don't know, the next guy. Hamels had that really good year, like 2018. He had another good year a little bit, but like the team wasn't that good. But he was never like Cy Young level. You could make an argument that Christopher Sanchez this year might be better than Hamels, any Hamels year there was. I know that sounds crazy, but it wouldn't be or Luzardo, by the way. One of those 2 guys. Then the next guy you go to is Oswalt and Joe Blanton. I think Suarez and Luzardo, I think the Phillies 5 is better than that Phillies 5.
Well, then you also have to look at the depth. You might have Andrew Painter come up and start some games for you. So you're going to have the young talent also be in the mix as well. You have 6 really good pitchers. And by the way, the top 30 ranking came out. Andrew Painter's number 1. No shock there. I believe he's number 9 overall in the entire pipeline. But then you have Painter. And if you add him into the mix, that's 6 really good pitchers right there for you heading into this season. I just don't feel like they should be on the cover of a magazine. You have 6 starters that are going to be really good. I mean, Andrew Painter's not known still at this point, and we don't know if he's going to start for the Phillies at all this year. They plan on having him start, but who knows? But that's 6 potential really good pitchers. I think's better than that rotation.
I agree, and I said this earlier. I have 3 big things that I'm excited about this Phillies team, and one of them is I think this starting pitching will be better than the 11 year.
Yeah, I think so. It's all dependent on if they stay healthy. If they stay healthy and you get a full season out of this entire group for the most part, with guys filling in here and there. I look at the roster and I'm thinking to myself, why isn't there more hype surrounding these 5 heading into the season? Because it's ridiculous how good to have those 5 pitchers on your staff is. We've been complaining about the lineup and should they have added another bat, et cetera. The pitching rotation on paper heading into this season, it should be the tops in baseball by far. By far.
It's a good astute point by you there, Nick Earnshaw.
I appreciate it. I feel like I come with these every once in a blue moon. I'll throw a decent nugget like this in there.
It's a good nugget.
Yeah, there we go. All right, moving along to nugget number 3. And I made a switcheroo before I came on. Before I get out of here, quick third nugget for you. How about Jeff Mosher making a Drewski reference? I feel like that went right over your head.
I don't know what Drewski is.
So I tweeted it out on Twitter. I tagged you. I tagged Mosher. He made a reference to Drewski regarding Deebo Samuel. Drewski is a comedian. He's a younger comedian that's been around on social media for a few years now. And he does skits and all that type of stuff. And he made that reference, and I almost fell out of my chair before I came onto the Nuggets today because
where would
that
I
was
know
hysterical.
him from?
He's just a social media guy. I mean, he was trying to think like what other stuff he's been on. He was on tour with J. Cole. He was a comedian opening up for a music act before, so he's done that. I'm trying to think like other stuff. He's just everywhere. He's on every social media platform possible. He does his own skits. He's gone viral so many times. He's gigantic. He's huge. Huge.
Never heard his name one time. This is the first time in my life I've ever heard the reference of Drewski.
Yeah, so I need you to do your Drewski research so that doesn't go over your head next time Mosher brings it up, because apparently he's a big Drewski fan. I'm gonna, I didn't expect that from Mosher. Good on Mosher for doing a Drewski reference to Deebo Samuel. I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I don't remember the reference, number one. Number two, I don't know who that is. Sorry.
Well, you do your research. You go on Twitter, you'll find out he's a comedian.
By the way, I was in your neck of the woods this weekend. I was up that way. Yeah, man. I was on the way up. I was up your way. I went to the Village Pub the other day. You live near there?
Yeah, I'm over that way. Berlin, Atco, Hamilton area. That's where I grew up. That was my neck of the woods. A Hamilton High School grad. So that's over by my way.
I was up there that way this weekend, and I was. By the way, for the people out there, Earnshaw got me a nice gift certificate for Christmas this year to the Brotherton Brewery. I was going to go hit it up on Saturday. I couldn't get out there because we got tied up. And then I read today they're closing.
I know they're closing at the end of the month. You got to get over there before they shut down.
We might do the brewery tour this weekend and do a little Brotherton, Berlin, Wims.
Yeah,
go out that way.
Yeah, that's there's some good spots right there.
I was going to call you too and be like, "Yo, stop by and meet us over there." We never made it though.
I never made it. It's all right. Try and make it this weekend. You'll be good. I got 2 days with Schweiner though, so we'll see how this works out.
Oh man, God bless you. All right, Earnshaw, there you go. There at the Nuggets today. Nick Earnshaw, everybody's back with more Nuggets tomorrow here on the Sports Bash. Coming up, we got Ryer Sy. That's next. Stick around. More Sports Bash plus Kevin Pelton, ESPN NBA writer, at 5:30. 5 o'clock, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, driving you home. It's a Monday edition, which means a little look back at the weekend, all the crazy stuff that happened. Of course, Joel Embiid on a Friday news dump was introduced to the world that he would be done for the year. No surprise there, but what's next for the big man? That's on the table. Darius Slay. The Eagles have released Slay. Will he be back in Philadelphia? That is on the table. Deebo Samuel is now in Washington with the Commanders. We got that, Philly stuff, and more. It's another edition of Rye or Cy. Ryan Rothstein joins me each and every day at this time as we take a look at all the top topics right here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. And let's take another unique look at what is happening in the world of sports. What do we got today there for the people?
Yeah, man, let's do it. Another edition. I'm getting all choked up. I'm excited of Rye or Cy. And we have a lot to get to. Obviously, Embiid, obviously Slay, obviously the Phils, right? There's a lot happening, as you just alluded to, MG. But I'm changing things up a little bit to start us off. We're going to get a little crazy here. Now, we used to do a segment called Better Bet. There's a version of this that I want to get into. We're going to have some fun. So, MVP. What's a better option here? Jalen Hurts next year at 17-1, or for the Phils, Bryce Harper 14-1. Who wins MVP first? Is it Jalen?
Right, what Jalen Hurts or Bryce Harper, right?
Correct. I'm going Harper.
Yeah, I would be more inclined to go Harper as well. My reasoning would be Hurts is in an offense where I don't know that he's going to put up MVP numbers. You know, he's not going to be like a 4,000-plus yard passer most likely. He's probably not going to be the guy who throws 30-plus touchdowns. He might combine for 30-plus touchdowns, and that puts you in the conversation. But Harper still, I think, can be a 335 homer. I just don't personally. I don't think either one of them, but I think Harper has the better shot.
Right. Well, yeah, I'm backing you into a corner. You got to pick one. So, all right.
Yeah, no. Harper would be of those two. I think Harper has the better shot for his window is probably closing for MVP season, and that's a scary proposition. You know, Harper's been here for like 6 years already. Like 6 of those 10 years, I think. Well, he signed in 19, so 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. This is his 7th season. Yeah, he's played 6 seasons here already.
It's crazy, yeah, because I just saw the video of, like, his first day after he signed, and it was the day where, in 2019, where Harper says, I want to bring a World Series back to D.C. He said D.C.
That's right.
Instead of
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that day because the day that happened is when my girlfriend and I were moving out of her place in Ventnor to where we live now.
There you go. 2019, 6 years ago. Crazy. All right. So speaking of the Phils, we'll go some full Phillies here. Phillies win the World Series or the Phillies miss the playoffs? What is more likely to happen?
Phillies win the World Series or Phillies miss the playoffs.
Yep.
I feel like I don't even hesitate on this one and say what's more likely to happen is they miss the playoffs.
Wow. Okay. So, listen, the betting odds obviously would agree with you. The Phillies right now are 12-1 to win the World Series, and for the Phillies to miss the postseason, they're plus 225. So,
I'll tell you why. The NL East, now the Mets have some injury issues, but that team is probably significantly better, and they beat you already last year. I mean, so right now they have that over you. I think the Braves, they had so many injuries last year. They're going to be better. The Dodgers are obviously really good. The Padres are really good. So it's not a fait accompli that you just back yourself into the playoffs here. One of the Central teams obviously has to get in. So you're really, only your shot is a very competitive National League East, and to be a wild card team, you got to beat out the other team in your division, the Padres. I think you start to look at Arizona. I think is much better this year. So I think there's a better chance that they don't make the playoffs than there is to win the World Series. I mean, that's like I'm taking almost the field here.
No, yeah, exactly, and the health for this Phillies team has been outstanding. Like last year, there was really barely any health concerns at all on the mound or in the lineup. Like that doesn't happen.
Yep.
luck's not going to remain on their side year in and year out. So I think we're going to be dealing with some more injuries, and their depth is not where you want it to be for the Phillies right now either.
Well, their depth, I think they have rotational pitching depth better now than they have before. You got your 5 starters pretty much locked into place. Wheeler, Nola, and we talked about this with the Nuggets last hour. I think this pitching rotation is going to be better than the 2011 team.
That's insanity.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself on this one. What?
Why? Just because there's depth or what? You think you and I talked about Wheeler. Is that going to continue? Is Nola going to continue? I mean,
well,
you're
listen,
banking on a lot.
If those two guys, I'm saying, like, if they're at the level, and I don't know.
Well, not if. Are you making the statement or are you not making it?
I don't think Wheeler or Nola are going to slide backwards. I think they both have high-level seasons still left in them for this year, definitely. I think Wheeler and Halladay, okay, bang, bang, right there. I'll take – now, Halladay's best 2 seasons, and 11 was included, is better than any season that Wheeler has had.
Right. And, yeah, that's a big assumption to say Wheeler's just going to continue to be the Cy Young guy again. I mean,
I don't see any reason why you would have a drop-off. He was at that level last year. He hasn't, had injury issues here. Yeah. I don't see him just now, Halladay did. He went from Cy Young to Buckus. Nothing. He was terrible.
Well,
but
most people do,
Yeah. I'm going to say Wheeler still has another very good Cy Young level season in him. So I go Wheeler. That doesn't mean he's going to be better than Halladay, but I don't even think he has to. Then you got Nola, and I think Nola can be comparable to Cliff Lee, that level. And if it's not Nola, I think either Sanchez or Luzardo can be up there with Cliff Lee. And then I think you're looking at Ranger Suarez as really your 5th guy, better than Blanton, better than Oswald. I think the Phillies 2, 3, 4, and 5 are better than that team's 2, 3, 4, and 5.
It's going to be interesting. And, you focused on the mound. I brought up the depth. I'm really looking in the field, right? My concern is if there's a couple of injuries, which we didn't really have to deal with any last year at all, there's really no one hanging out on that bench to cover us for a month or 2 months if and when that needs to happen. That's my concern with this Phillies team.
That's
outside of Sosa.
Yeah, that's accurate. They do not have a very deep bench. Sosa right now, he's playing outfield. He's playing infield. You've lost Weston Wilson. I think he was kind of your super utility guy that was kind of playing all over the place. You lost him. You do have Cody Clemens. He's not a guy you want to play every day, long term. I agree with you there. Yeah, they just don't have a lot of, if Bryce Harper got hurt. If Bryce Harper got hurt, though, theoretically you could play Schwarber at first base, and then you're looking at a different rotating DH or something to that effect. Or you could play Real Muto at first base. It's not ideal.
No.
Who would be the one guy on this team that would be the toughest to replace?
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. I was trying to think if it's outfield or – is it like an Alec Boehm or is it a Trey Turner? Probably
the
not
thing
Turner.
If you lost Boehm or Turner, you put Sosa there and he plays that spot. Or if you lost Stott, Sosa could play second, short, and third.
Right.
I don't want to say long term, but let's say one of those guys got hurt and they were out 2 months. You could play Sosa. Trey Turner missed time last year and Sosa played shortstop and the team actually got better.
Yeah, he was unbelievable. He was the best shortstop in the NL for a while, Sosa. So it has to be outfield. It has to be outfield. I would say if it's Casty or anyone in the outfield, you're in trouble.
Casty would probably be, what's interesting, Casty would probably be the guy because you don't have that right-handed outfield bat to even come close to replacing him.
Yeah.
Because if you lost Kepler, you play Harper. You could move Marsh to left field. You could play Schwarber, could play some left field. But you really don't have a right-handed hitting outfielder that you could replace, let's say Castellanos hits 20 to 25 home runs, and that would be ideal if he could do that. I don't know that he does. But if you lost him and I can't believe I'm saying this, he's probably the toughest guy to replace on the roster.
No, absolutely. Based off the lack of depth and what we just sort of outlined, it's going to be interesting, man. I fear that we talk about the window of opportunity. I fear the Phillies' window of opportunity is in the rear view. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I can, you can sigh at that or you can agree with me. But I think when looking at this team, when looking at the fortune that they've had in the regular season last year, I don't know if they win 96 games and they win the division again and they're able to win a World Series. Like, I don't see it.
Their shot is because they're pitching. That's why in 2011 they won 100 and whatever games, because every night they had a pitcher out there that was better than the other guy. When you're throwing Luzardo and they're on their fifth guy, you got a big check mark. When you're throwing Sanchez and they're on their fourth guy, you constantly should have the better pitcher pitching. Almost every now, there's going to be some nights where it's lined up a little wonky. If Skeens is pitching and you've got Suarez, Skeens is probably better than Suarez. That doesn't mean you can't. But like the 2011 team, all 5 guys give you a legitimate shot to win every single night, and that's how you could pile up a lot of wins.
All right, so I want to throw this one at you too. It's not a better bet type of game here, but. While we're on the Phillies talk, who is the most important player? It's sort of a player to watch for the Phillies, but instead of just asking you a player to watch, it's who is the X factor for this Phillies team this year. I'll start. I've defended Alec Boehm in the past. He's a guy that's been mentioned a lot in the trade market. I think this is a guy that if he's able to be the guy that we saw in July last year, right? Like the best version of Alec Boehm. He's 29 years old, MG. Like, this is the season where I think it's all right. Who is this guy? Who is Alec Boehm, and what can he be for this Phillies team? He's my X factor for this team in the lineup. What about you?
I would agree, and I brought this up earlier. I'm really excited about 3 things. The pitching rotation, I think, can be better than the 2011 team. I think Boehm is ready to kind of take that next. Last year he had a really good year. They need him to be great. He was good last year. He was good. He was good.
He was too much up and down.
Homers.
Too much up and down, but he was really good.
Yeah. He was 280, 15 homers, 97 RBI. I think if he can get himself to 23 homers, can he be a 285? And can he be 110 to 115 RBI guy? Can he get those numbers all up a little bit? He had 2 homers yesterday, both kind of opposite field. That was a really good, good to see. I think Boehm could be the guy that takes that next jump from good player to really good player. He was the starting all-star third baseman. He had a really good first half of the year. Then he got hurt and really fell off.
Now, I want to hear the other. You said your 3 keys. You said the starters. You said Alec Boehm. What was your third?
My third is the lineup shakeup and what that might mean finally for this team. Because I think Trey Turner has been disappointing in his first 2 years here. I think batting him leadoff, you might get the better version of Trey Turner hitting him in the leadoff spot, which in turn I think makes everybody else give you a little bit more. I think the lineup having a better Boehm. I think the lineup having a better Stott and shaking it up a little bit. Having Turner at the top, whoever's going to hit 2, that means whoever's going to hit 3. That little bit of a shakeup, I think, could be the difference in them kind of being this stale lineup as opposed to one that has a little, the one before had so many ways to get them out. I think if you this little tweak to it with Turner at the top, if he can get himself – now, this is all depending on Trey Turner being more comfortable hitting leadoff, which is where he's hit the most in his career. He's hit leadoff more times than any other spot in the order, and it's also the best numbers. He hits better as a leadoff guy than any other spot in the lineup. So can I get the best version of Trey Turner? And if I can get the best version of Trey Turner, that should make this lineup way more dangerous.
I want to add a little piece to everything you just said too, if you don't mind. Like for me, another thing that I'm looking at, something I'm watching, is the power. Right, in 2023, the Phillies had 220 homers as a team. Last year, they had under 200, 195, 198. The number was. Now, listen, not a huge variance there, but if they can be around 220, 230, even higher than that, I think the power is the key for this team in this offense. What are your thoughts?
Well, this is a team that should hit a lot of homers with Harper. 30 plus you're hoping. I need to see more from Castellanos in the power department. He has been, listen, I was a huge fan of that signing when they made that signing. 3 years later into the 4th season, not as big of a fan of that deal. Just hasn't worked out. They gave him 5 years, $100 million, $20 million a year to be the middle of the order right-handed bat. And we're still waiting for a right-handed bat because his power has not been what it was when they signed him. Don't forget, when they signed him, he was coming off a year where he had 30 home runs, hit 300, had over 100 RBI with the Cincinnati Reds. He has not come anywhere close to those numbers. If he can approach, I'm not saying he has to hit 30, but can he give me 25? Can I get 30, 35 from Harper? Do I still have 35, 40 out of Schwarber? Can Bohm bounce up to 20, 25 instead of 15? Can Stott get me back into double digits? He had a lousy power year last year. So there's a lot of power, I think, that's still in there somewhere.
Yeah, and, if Cassie comes out scorching hot, do they leverage that demand, like sell high? Do they utilize that for a trade, or do they keep rocking with the same lineup, right? Like, there's just so many things, so many moving pieces to this team. I don't want them to make a trade, but I am curious to see what will happen if Cassie comes out scorching hot in the first 2 months of the year. Are they going to look to flip that,
Yeah, well, Cassie has 2 more years left on the deal. That's going to be a tough one. And if remember last year, he got off to a terrible start last year. Yeah. My gosh, he was horrible. And then he ended up playing all 162. And we're like, how do you not give this guy a day off? He's killing this team. Yeah. Then he kind of turned it on a little bit. I mean, hey, listen, he brought himself to respectability last year, had 23 homers, which is fine if he hits 23 homers. But I feel like just not consistent enough for my liking.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
And I don't think anybody else is liking it. My point is to trade for $20 million for next year. Because that's the problem. Right. He has $20 million on the books again for next year.
Yeah. All right.
He is 30. He will be 33 years old tomorrow.
Wow. Okay. I didn't realize he was 33. Okay.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. Happy birthday, Cassie. If I don't tell you tomorrow. All right, so the Sixers, I want to squeeze in one more better bet, and maybe we can end with a minute or two on the Embiid news. Sixers right now are sitting at 21 wins. They're 21-38. We just talked about the Phils in great detail. Pick one here, MG. The 76ers over 30.5 wins, or the Phillies, their win total is 91.5. Which one do you like more?
Definitely Phillies.
Okay. There's 13 games left.
Mainly
they have 21 wins. So
there's 13 games left. That's it?
23. I'm sorry. 20. In my head, I was thinking 10 and 13 because that would get them over.
And what are they at right now?
21 wins.
And what's the over-under?
30.
They're not getting 30 wins. No way.
They're not going 9-14 or whatever it is?
No.
It's 5 games under 500. Can they make a little push here?
No, they cannot. Oubre's not playing tonight either, so there you go.
All right, there we go.
They won the game on Saturday night. I don't know what happened. You need 44 points from Quentin Grimes. That's not happening very often the rest of the season. They will not win 9 more games this year. That would be my take there.
Yeah,
and 981. I just got done saying I think the Phillies pitching is going to be good enough that I know this kind of contradicts what I said before, that what's a better shot, not making the playoffs or winning the World Series. But I just don't think they're the best team to win the World Series. So I have to say not make the playoffs. But I think with this pitching rotation, you should be around 95 to 100 wins.
I think so, too. I would actually go with the Sixers. I think the Sixers can finish this stretch 9-13, 10-12, which would get them to 30, 31 wins. And the Phillies the health scares me. That's such a variable. And I know I'm not saying much with that.
It's fair.
But I just feel like the other shoe's about to drop this year, man, with the Phillies.
Listen, they've lost guys over the years, but not like, they had Harper with the elbow. He missed the start of the season. They had Turner with the hamstring. You had Bohm last year, missed about a month. But you haven't had like multiple guys. JT missed about a month. They really, though, haven't lost one of those pitchers.
Their pitching was very healthy last year, as well as their lineup, like their everyday guys. Like they had 4 guys with at least 27 starts last year. That's a big deal. Can they replicate that? That's almost crazy to ask to do that again.
Yeah, and listen, you got two older guys. I mean, Nola's not an older guy, but I mean, he's starting. I mean, because Nola has like never missed a start in his life. I mean, I feel like he never misses a start. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, him and Wheeler. Since Wheeler got here, he's had multiple years where he's gone well over 200 innings pitched. So we'll see.
Which is funny because that's why the Mets kind of let him go because he had injury problems there.
Yeah, he never got over 200 in New York, if my memory serves me. So
yep,
yeah. How much time we have to get into some of this Joel Embiid stuff?
Couple minutes. Yeah.
All right. So let's get into it while I'm still here. What are your thoughts on all of this madness? Like the medical retirement, that's what I want to discuss with Joel Embiid. Do you think that that is a legitimate option that the 76ers may actually look into coming up this offseason?
Oh, sure. I mean, not this offseason. Keith Smith, who does our show a lot, he was asked a question on Twitter. This is not like a official report that it's going to happen, but I think he was asked what would happen. This is the option. And what Keith basically said is for 1 year from the time that he got put on the injured list that basically ended his season, which was February, what was Friday, the 28th?
Think so.
Right?
Yeah. Sounds right.
So 1 year from then, and I'm trying to find the tweet. Man, Keith tweets a lot. Jeez. My understanding from reading the tweet is 1 year. Here it is. He actually said, to be clear, I don't expect this to happen. I was answering a question about what could happen if Embiid was unable to make it back to playing. But his understanding is if 1 year from now he still cannot play, then he would be eligible for a medical retirement. And then that point, his number would come off your books.
Yeah, I wonder if a year from now he can't play, what does that actually mean? Like the details of it. Does that mean exactly a year from today if Embiid's played under 20 games? Like what's the threshold that qualifies him?
I think if a year from Friday, which just happened, he still has not played a game and is not medically cleared to play, and then if Embiid decides I'll never be able to play again, I am retiring.
Right. So
not like, hey, a year has passed. If he doesn't retire, then, I mean, he has to officially then sign the papers and all that stuff.
Yeah, see, that initial report, like the headline, it didn't seem like that was the case. It appeared without any homework or digging in. It was like the Sixers could actually go this route without Embiid actually saying he's retiring, which was eye-opening.
That's where, as Keith kind of sub-quoted that report and said, I'm not reporting that. I just was asked a question of what could happen if, let me bring up, here's the tweet. You actually sent it to me. I should have just gone there in the first place. All right. The question was, I guess it isn't guaranteed, but what if he genuinely can't play any games for the last 2 to 3 years of the contract? Does he just get paid to not play and be a super locker room voice or something? To which Keith said, if Joel Embiid is unable to play starting February 22nd, 2026, 1 year after his last game. Okay, 1 year after his last game, not when they put him on the injured list and put him out for the year. The Sixers could petition for a medical retirement. At that point, an independent doctor selected by the NBA and the NBA Players Association would examine Embiid. If he can no longer play, his remaining contract would be wiped off the books.
Okay, so I mean, that's still a long shot, obviously, but the fact that that's even an option is wild to me. I don't believe we've ever seen anything like that actually take place. I didn't even know that was an option in the rule book.
I think there's been a couple guys. I'm trying to think. Who was the guy for Portland? He was a good player. Brandon Roy. I think he was a guy who had a similar situation with knee problems that, just couldn't play because of that. It's rare.
Yeah.
We'll see if it gets to this. Who knows? We have no idea what this thing is right now. Now you're up in the air until the Sixers decide to give you more information.
Yeah. It's a mess, man. It's a mess.
All right. That's Ryer Sai.
All right, man.
See ya. All right, he's back tomorrow with more Ryer Sai here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app. Coming up on the other side, what can the Sixers really do next. Kevin Pelton, NBA writer for ESPN.com, maps it all out in a recent article, and then he joins us next on the Sports Bash. All right, 532, Sports Best, 97.3 ESPN. Sixers taking on the Portland Trailblazers, two teams that I believe don't have a lot of interest in winning tonight's game. But Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com, writes how to fix the Sixers. A couple other teams as well that have had some rough seasons. But unlike the Trailblazers, the Sixers had legitimate expectations. Those expectations obviously will not be met. So now what? Let's bring in ESPN.com NBA writer Kevin Pelton back to the show. It's been a while. Kevin, what's going on, man?
Nothing much. How are you?
As you know, this has not gone the way the Sixers anticipated. Man, where did we do have the Eagles, but where did it all go wrong for Philly? I know that's a broad question, but where do you think it kind of started? Because it never got off the ground, it looked like.
Yeah, I think you have to start with Joel Embiid's knee because, kind of everything that they did was built around the premise that Embiid was going to be the MVP caliber player that we've seen over the last several years. And, even the version of him we saw in last year's playoffs coming back from the injury, like that would be a good enough player to build a contending team around, but we never saw that version of Embiid this season. And the hope has to start with the possibility that, whatever can be done, whether it's surgical or otherwise, this time off, with him not playing the rest of the season, that when they come back and next October, that he can look like Joel Embiid again, because otherwise, you look at the rest of this group and without him as a top 5 player in the world, it just doesn't work as a contender.
As you wrote, you said it would be easier to listen about what's gone right for this team, but is it as simple as in your mind that, hey, Joel Embiid and Paul George are back and this team's pretty good?
I think it's a little bit more than that. Paul George, we'll see what level he can get back to next season. Obviously, some health issues for him as well. He's dealing with these pain-killing injections right now, and unclear how much longer he should continue to play through them. But I don't think he's going to be peak Paul George. The guy that the Clippers gave up all the draft picks and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to get him and Kawhi Leonard and pair them at this stage of his career. But they have to upgrade the front court as well, especially knowing that, look, even if it is that MVP caliber Joel Embiid, it's not going to be for 82 games in the regular season. And they thought they had a plan for that with Andre Drummond and Gershon Yabusele. And Yabusele has played quite well, but Drummond, I think, has been one of the bigger disappointments where you thought that was going to be, you were going to be ahead of the curve in terms of backup center. And he's probably been a below average backup center, especially in comparison to the version that they had a few years ago in Philadelphia.
Yeah, Kevin, that was a big thing. You're right. The Sixers' backup center spot has been a disaster during the Embiid era. The only time they kind of filled it was that short little window they had Drummond the first time. They figured bringing him back would fix that, but he has been out, which has left that spot a total disaster. And obviously, with Embiid out, it's an even bigger mess. But how about the Paul George situation? You write that maybe they should consider shutting him down, but he hasn't been what they thought either, right?
No, I mean, I think what he was last year with the Clippers, again, if they got that, it's a totally different situation because now between him and Tyrese Maxey, you've got two guys playing at an all-star level. You can keep one of them on the court, nearly all the time when they're healthy, and that just hasn't been the Paul George they've gotten this season. It's a little mysterious because, usually you expect kind of a drop-off in some of the athletic indicators. Your steal rate, your rebound rate, things like that tend to drop off for star players more quickly. And instead, in Paul George's case, it's mostly been, he's been pretty solid there. It's mostly just been about the shooting not being where we've come to expect.
Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com, covers the NBA. And, of course, the Sixers season has been a disaster. Before we move on from the George thing, when they signed George, how did you think that trio was going to work?
I mean, I thought they would be the second best team in the East this season. So, I was a believer in it like everyone else and, saw the vision that they were imagining for it. And then I've been as disappointed as Philadelphia certainly has by this season.
All right. So that hasn't worked out either. You shut down George potentially. Is there anything in the last couple of weeks that Daryl Morey has done that you like, that kind of sets up for next year?
I think a couple of things. I mean, leading up to the trade deadline, Quentin Grimes, the 41-point performance is not something that you should get used to in Philly, but I think that was a tremendous pickup, especially to originally get the
We
pick.
were laughing today, Kevin. Is that a Dana Barrows or Willie Burton as a more unusual 40-plus score? I know they scored 50.
I'd say it's more Dana Barrows, where it's on the high end, but this is somebody who can be, Sixers, I think. And I don't quite understand why he's shuffled around so much the past year, starting in New York and brief stint in Detroit and then Dallas after they got Nick Christie. That sort of made sense that he was a bit redundant for them, but I didn't, I thought that was a great value for the Sixers. And, Grimes is somebody I watched playing when he was with the Mavericks in person in December and was really struck by the thought, this guy is an extremely skilled shooter. He can handle the ball a fair amount. If he played in the 90s, he would be an all-star. He would be one of the best shooting guards in the league. And now there's just so much skill in the league that, this is a guy who's shuffling around from one team to another. But I do think, is a role player around healthy versions of, the Sixers stars. He's the kind of guy you want in that spot.
You take a look at, you wrote that, look, you got to do everything you can to keep that pick. It's sad that this is what it's come to, but how important is that pick to Philadelphia?
I don't think it's tremendously important for 2025-26 because, most players that you're going to draft in the lottery, they're 19-year-olds. They're not going to help you win very much. But if you look ahead to Joel Embiid, post-Paul, that's another, Tyrese Maxey, I think the Sixers view is kind of that long-term building block. And if they kept the pick and got a top 6 pick and what it looks like a loaded draft, I think that would be another building block for you to point to. One thing that I think separates Philadelphia, as depressing as this season has been, I think it's a difference from Phoenix where, there is really just no light at the end of the tunnel right now.
Your bullet point number 3, and you can read this full article at ESPN.com. Kevin Pelton, click on the NBA tab at ESPN.com, and he kind of outlines these. But rebuild the front court depth. This is an area that, we'll get into Morey in a minute, but is this an area they thought they had kind of fixed?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Drummond. The other piece of it was mentioned briefly Caleb Martin in terms of, him going out to Dallas in the trade. But again, that was one where, it looked like an incredible coup that they had managed to sign him, given the limited cap space they had remaining, after the George shot. Already committed to use their room mid-level to bring back Kelly Oubre, and he, just didn't really perform at that level this season. Whether it's, kind of consistently having to play power forward after being more interchangeable defensively in Miami with a bunch of similar-sized guys, or just his age, and then you had the injury factor later in the season, which is he remained sidelined. He wasn't forward spot. So, figuring out what you're going to do there, I think is another question. If the, Sixers are going to get back into contention next year, you're going to have to find a better solution at that spot.
Kevin Pelton's with us here. You mentioned Drummond. They brought in Caleb Martin. That didn't work. He was constantly hurt. They brought in Eric Gordon. He didn't work out. So now these last 20-plus games, you're looking at, you mentioned Grimes. You're looking at a Butler. You're looking at Bona and hoping that you can find something. You're getting Jared McCain back. Is it as gloom and doom as this season has seemed if you're a Sixers fan?
It goes back to the health, but I do think there are some positives you can take that, you mentioned. The other piece of it is going to be, are they able to re-sign Yabusele, knowing that they don't have, any kind of bird rights on him. So it's going to probably take an exception to match the offers that he would get after having a strong season, because he can be part of that mix as well, although it feels like maybe he's a little bit more effective offensively if you play him at.
Did we lose you, Kevin? You there?
Been a bit of a revelation as an undrafted rookie and two-way guy. So, I think he's stretched. The idea of him being your starting power forward is a stretch, but him being part of the rotation in a long-term piece, you have found some of these guys. And McCain, obviously the most important of them, where he was on track to be the easy rookie of the year had he stayed healthy. And, I don't think you have any concerns about what he comes back as next season. But that was just kind of part of the disappointment of this year, that he gets off to such a strong start and then the season ends in December.
But last thought from you is Morey is a lightning rod now. There's some people who think he's done a good job. Some people think he's been awful. Some people think he's in trouble. How did he give Embiid the deal? How do you kind of it's weird because it seems that the moves that Morey has made have universally been like, hey, that's a good job. You got out of the Horford deal. How did you make that trade? How did you get out of the Simmons thing? Like, on the surface, it seems like he's done some good things. He drafted Maxey. He drafted McCain. But do you look at Morey as a guy who's in trouble?
I think that kind of depends on, ownership and what they knew and, sort of what was a calculated risk and what was not. I mean, obviously the state of Embiid's knee is the biggest thing that they have a lot more information on the inside when they decided to sign him to that extension last summer than we do on the outside. And that's the part that, is harder to evaluate, because from a process standpoint, we know that a lot of teams were interested in Paul George, and the Warriors were ready to make a trade if he would have opted in there, and they would have chosen that path over Jimmy Butler. So we can say that was a pretty reasonable decision for the Sixers to make, to go out and get him, and something that everyone saw as a huge win for them at the time. And I think it's a little unfair to criticize them for something that no one saw coming. But Embiid's, knee issues, those are something that were potentially a little more foreseeable that we wouldn't have known about from the outside of the organization.
I think when you look at the George thing, is that a guy, Kevin Pelton, you would look to try to see his value in the offseason, or do you try one more chance or season to try to run these three guys together?
I mean, the one thing, if it is still Daryl Morey running the show, we know that he's going to, turn over every bush in pursuit of an upgrade. So I'm sure that's something you consider. I wouldn't sell, extremely low on him, because I do think he's capable of playing better than this, even at this stage of his career. But if there's a move where, you sort of, maybe along the lines of what Milwaukee did with Chris Middleton, where you traded him for Kyle Kuzma, and that the high-end outcomes from Kuzma are not going to be as good as what you could potentially get from a healthy Chris Middleton, but you just get someone that you can rely on more, especially given, the uncertainty around Embiid's health. That might be the kind of move that would make sense for the Sixers.
ESPN.com NBA writer Kevin Pelton, he's been there for over a decade covering the NBA. You could check out all of his stuff over at ESPN.com on the X platform at K Pelton. And he was kind enough to join us here on the Sports Bash, looking back at a disastrous Sixers season. They'll play the Blazers tonight right here on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks for having me. Hopefully the next time we're talking, the situation's a little better.
We hope so, man. That'll hopefully, by the way, could be draft time when these Sixers are drafting in the lottery. Kevin does a lot of draft stuff as well. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. And, of course, there's so much that has been wrong about this Sixers season. The one thing he mentioned that did go right was Jared McCain. And keep in mind, McCain is a guy that could be coming back next year. That will be a big help. Also, the other thing is, he mentioned Quentin Grimes, who has been an interesting pickup. I don't know that Grimes, to me, is a good fit with Maxey. I mean, he's kind of a score-first shooting guard, kind of undersized, if you will. But we'll see. These next couple of nights, these 20-plus games, it's process time, man. You got to start finding some pieces. Who's your Covington? Who's your T.J. McConnell? Who's your Jeremy Grant? They found those guys playing games like this. That's what you got to get out of the rest of this season. All right, Mike Gill, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. I only gave you one play in the Bet365 play of the day this weekend. I don't know how it did. I don't remember back that far to Friday, but hopefully we had a winner for you, because if we didn't, I have some winners for you tonight. So stick around for my Bet365 play of the day coming up next on the Sports Bash. All right, 5:52, getting ready to get out of here. It's the Bet365 play of the day, and I got a couple plays for you today. Just one over the weekend, didn't go so well.
Yeah, you had the Celtics handling the Cavs to cover that spread. Now it was only a 1-pointer, so it was kind of like a pick-em situation. Cavs came back and won that game.
Yeah, good game Friday night.
Great game.
Unfortunate. What's the record?
Well, your record is still great, though. It's 117-81-1.
Yeah, 117-81-1. I can't argue with that record, but what I can do is give you some more winners. I got the Mavericks tonight plus 1.5 against Sacramento. I got Duke tonight minus 19.5. I know that's a big number, but they excel in this spot against Wake Forest. And I got Golden State 13.5 against Charlotte tonight. And they are my Bet365 plays of the day.
Did you say 13.5?
That's the number.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? Any other questions?
No, I just didn't hear the last 13.5 because my mind immediately went to Charlotte. I thought of Steph Curry and his dad and all that kind of stuff.
This from Josina Anderson.
Your friend.
She says, it's my understanding that Darius Slay won't have to wait until post-June 1st to talk and negotiate with other teams, especially given the respect and affinity the Eagles have for him. Schefter was first to report Slay will be designated as post-June 1st release. Typically can't talk before he's technically cut. So is that indicating that she thinks he might be back?
I think she's indicating that the Eagles are not going to prevent him if he just wants to go somewhere else, kind of deal. Like they can come to an agreement and the Eagles are not going to be like, you tampered kind of thing.
I'm assuming they're allowing him to talk and allowing him to talk to teams before he's cut.
Because remember, they
it's just
did
a cap thing. It isn't just paperwork.
Right, but they did this a couple of years ago. Remember when they initially released him and he started talking to the Ravens.
And had offered for more money.
And then they were like, well, we didn't get C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Do you want to come back, Slay? And he was like, yes. And he dropped the Ravens like a hot potato.
So we'll see how that all plays out. That is the latest. Darius Slay cut today by the Eagles. So the first casualty of the 2024 Super Bowl season roster is Darius Slay. I want to thank everybody for watching and listening today. You can check us out on the X platform, at Mike Gill Show, on YouTube, at Mike Gill Show. Like, subscribe, hit the like button, hit the subscribe. That's the best. If you haven't done so yet, download the free mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. That's a great way to take us everywhere you go. And I'll be back tomorrow right here on the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. Game night's up next, followed by Sixers and Blazers. Have a great rest of your Monday, everybody. I'm out.